Welcome to Taiwan Insider Decision 2020. We're coming to you live from the RTI studios in downtown Taipei, bringing you 3 hours of election coverage. I'm Andrew Ryan.
I am Natalie So, and in the next few hours, we will know who won the presidential and legislative elections.
That's right. Also with us in the studio today, we have our social media guru, Leslie Liao, joining us. Hi, Leslie.
How's it going,
Hey,
guys?
Leslie.
Good to have you here with us in the studio today.
Always good to be here.
And you're going to be bringing us comments and questions, yeah?
That's right. We are broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube, and so far we have about 18 viewers.
And that's going to climb to 1 million over the next hour, I'm sure.
I'm going for 2 million. 2 million.
All right. Well, we're going to go straight now to our most current results. We are now getting some election results in. We're going to show you, we have a feed from CTS, who's our media partner here. So we're going to go offer
Let's
you
take a look at
that. Not that yet. We're going to go into our live television feed from CTS, Huashi, and we're going to show you the election results as they're coming in. Right now, we have President Tsai Ing-wen, who is the incumbent, who is, you can see in the upper left-hand corner, she has 2.4 million votes. Is that
No,
right?
that's
no,
290,000
sorry, 290,000 votes.
That's from the Central Election Commission, which are the official votes. Now, on the right-hand top side are the votes coming in from the polls from KMT people that are reporting what's being tallied up. But the official ones are on the left, only about 10% of what's
That's
actually
correct.
on the right.
And most of the media are actually reporting much higher figures. So we're going to be bringing you both of those, both the official results from the Central Election Commission, which you see on the left, as we mentioned, and then also the tallies, the preliminary tallies. A lot of the media here in Taiwan are offering those tallies now. And it looks like, at least if you look at the ones on the right, 2.9 million votes. She's got a comfortable lead right now over the number 2 candidate, which is Han Kuo-yu, with about 2 million votes. So nearly 1 million votes more.
And there are 19 million eligible voters. So right now we're seeing maybe, what, 20...
About 20% of the vote.
Yeah, so we still have a lot of votes to count. And if you look at the second bottom half of the screen, those are the legislative elections on the left side. All the gray are the different results of the legislative elections. And on the right hand bottom side is the presidential election by city. So
you can see how many votes each of the presidential candidates got in each city and county across Taiwan. Now, we do recognize that all of these are in Chinese. We'll do our best to translate as much of that as we can throughout the night.
And if you have any questions for us or comments, do let us know, and we will try to get to them throughout the show. And Leslie will be bringing those to us, right?
I will be watching the Facebook stream and the YouTube stream, so there will be someone behind the chat, and that person will be me.
Yes.
I will be feeding you 2 questions from our great viewers, and you know what? Let's stump these guys, so see what you guys can throw at them.
Yes, all right. And hopefully it's mostly presidential or legislative election related.
Right.
So we look forward to those, yeah?
And we're also very excited to have 3 great guests to join us the next 3 hours. Let's take a look at who's going to be joining us. On the first hour, it's Professor Shirley Lin. She is a political economist at University of Virginia, also at Chinese University of Hong Kong. She also wrote the book Taiwan's China Dilemma.
And then in hour 2, we'll have Lev Nachman, who is a Fulbright scholar here in Taiwan, studying small parties here. So we're going to have a lot to talk with him about in the second hour. He's also a PhD candidate at UC Irvine.
And in the third hour, from Stanford University, Carlos Templeman will be joining us. He's a political scientist there. And let's introduce our candidates now, the stars of the race. Let's take a look at the 3 candidates who are running for president.
We're going to have a look at those 3. We have President Tsai Ing-wen, who is, I'm sorry, that's on the far right there. She's the incumbent from the Democratic Progressive Party. We have Han Kuo-yu in the middle there from the Kuomintang, who is giving her a fierce challenge for the presidency and really rode to a wave of popularity and a blue wave to become the mayor of Kaohsiung about a year ago. On the far left there, we have James Song from the People First Party. He has actually run for president more times than anyone else in Taiwan. However, he has never won the
Won.
presidency.
Right.
Yeah.
And okay, and also we're going to be electing a new legislature. So now let's take a look at what our current legislature looks like.
A little breakdown of all of the seats that you can see on this next chart. We're going to show you there are 113 seats total. Now, the green seats, those are the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party. Before the elections, they had 68 seats, essentially giving the president a mandate and a lot of leeway to do the things she wanted to do during her first term. And then the KMT has 35 seats, and then the small parties and independents have about 10 seats total. So it'll be interesting to see whether some of those smaller parties can get more seats in this election.
Right. And any major party needs 57 seats for a majority. So we'll see how that turns out.
Now, when voters went to the polls, they actually had 3 different ballots that they could vote on. Of course, we have the presidential and also the vice presidential ballot. But then we have 2 other ballots, and those are both for legislative seats. Now, some of them, 73 of the legislative seats are for geographic constituencies, which means they represent people in the district in which you live. And that's a winner-takes-all vote. So you vote for a candidate, and only one person wins in each district. Then we have 6 indigenous seats representing Aborigines in Taiwan, and then 34 party seats. You also get to vote for a party, and then the different parties, depending on what percentage of the vote they take there, then they get allotted a certain number of seats, which they then get to choose. They get to assign to candidates who are on the closed party list that each of them has announced prior to the elections.
Okay, so the big question of the night is, however, who is going to win the presidential election? And we're going to be giving you some profiles of the 3 major candidates. First, let's take a look at James Song. He is the People First Party chairman and the third party candidate in the race. People First Party Chairman James Song is offering voters what he's calling a third option for people tired of the sparring between the 2 major parties. The 77-year-old veteran politician is on his 4th run for president. This time he's running with former media tycoon Yu Xiang. Song was born into a Kuomintang military family. He received a master's in poli-sci from UC Berkeley and a PhD from Georgetown University. Song later became the head of the Government Information Office. His popularity grew, and in 1994, he became the only elected governor of the Taiwan province. In the 2000 election, when the Kuomintang chose Lian Zhan as its presidential candidate, Song broke away from the party to run as an independent and later started the People First Party. In 2000, he ran with Professor Zhang Zhaosheng and got over 36% of the votes, losing by just 2.5%. 4 years later, he joined forces with Lian Zhan and ran for vice president, taking nearly 50% of the vote. In 2012, Song chose public health professor Lin Ruisheng as his running mate, and they got less than 3% of the vote. In the last election, Song ran with Minkuodang's Xu Xinying, and they got nearly 13% of the tally. Song says this election is his end game. If elected, he will push to move Taiwan to a parliamentary system. For the past 2 terms, his party held 3 seats in the legislature.
This is Taiwan Insider Decision 2020. We are coming to you live from the RTI studios in downtown Taipei, bringing you rolling coverage of the election results here in Taiwan. Now, the polls closed at 4 p.m., and we are now at just after 6 p.m., bringing you some results.
Yes, and I'm Natalie So.
I'm Andrew Ryan.
We're actually here every Thursday with a weekly news magazine called Taiwan Insider with news and features. But today we're doing a live special because it's a very exciting day for Taiwan today.
Absolutely.
And with us this hour, we have a very special guest, a political economist at University of Virginia and also at Chinese University of Hong Kong, Professor Shirley Lin. She's the author of Taiwan's China Dilemma. Shirley, it's great to have you on the show.
Welcome to the show.
It's great to be back, Natalie. Thank you.
Yes, so Shirley's been here before at RTI, and she is an expert on Taiwan. Let's take a look now at the results and see how things are going in the race. Let's take a look at our CTS. There we go. So in the left corner, we see Tsai Ing-wen is still leading.
That's right.
She has 420,000 votes that are official.
And if we look at the projections, it looks like she's now projected to get, or at this current moment, 3.1 million votes to about nearly 2.2 million votes for Han Kuo-yu, her main opponent from the KMT. Now, let's get Shirley to respond to what we're looking at right now. What do you think about these results?
Well, I guess for Tsai to have 50% more than Han, that's where we are actually right now. Some people may say that's expected. Others might say actually the lead is less than expected. But finally, many actually thought Han was going to win. And I would say many in the sense that just like Trump and Johnson, nobody really knew what to expect because Taiwan's polls stop in the last few days. And in December, Han decided to throw in a wrench by asking his supporters to stop responding to polls. So we were kind of in the dark.
That's right.
So are you surprised at seeing Tsai leading, or do you think that was what you expected?
I think most people, I would say analysts, expected some kind of a win, but not sure of the lead. And I think this is quite important because the lead would allow the DPP government to have more legitimacy, and in a very divided society, some would have said. And most importantly, this is an election like no other before, which of course, every election they say that. But this one truly is different.
Why do you say that?
The two candidates have very little overlap in terms of their ideas and their vision of Taiwan's future with China and with the world. And in the past, most candidates overlapped quite a bit in saying they can deal with both a closer relationship with China and a strong relationship with the United States.
You know, what's interesting is that all three candidates have mentioned the words national doom in the run-up to the elections. What are all three concerned about? Obviously, they have different definitions of what national doom means.
Well, I think it's quite interesting because the KMT in this particular race really focus on Republic of China and the fact that its survival depends on a large part on, I would say, the grace of Beijing. And therefore, DPP being Tsai being persona non grata for Beijing is a non-starter. That's sort of Han's primary position, that by voting for the DPP, Taiwan is going to be inevitably hurt, not just economically and in a broader sense, doomed. And for the DPP, exactly the same conclusion with totally different arguments. And that is that if Taiwan continues to get closer to China, even if only economically. So far, I think there's not even a consensus, but the general idea is we need to continue to trade with and invest in China. That being said, many people believe that's on the basis of an autonomous Taiwan that safeguards its values like democracy. And the DPP says, unless we do that, we are doomed.
Let's have another look at our results as they're coming in. On the upper left-hand corner, you can see that the incumbent president, Tsai Ing-wen, now has about 3.3 million votes. And this is the projections. Again, this is not the official Central Elections Commission results. Of course, the CEC results are the official results and will determine the winner. But this is where we're projected at right now. That's as compared to 2.2 million votes for her main rival, Han Kuo-yu. And of course, James Song is down there with about 258,000 votes in the presidential race here in Taiwan.
Well, we have a profile of President Tsai Ing-wen. Let's take a look at that video right now.
Start with James Song, I think, yeah?
We did that already.
We did that already.
Yeah.
All right.
So let's do. Let's take a look at President Tsai Ing-wen and her time in office.
Let's have a look at that video and see how she got to this place in the campaign and these results here with the presidency.
President Tsai Ing-wen made history in 2016, becoming Taiwan's first female president. Now, she's hoping for a second term in office. Tsai was born in Taipei in 1956. She has law degrees from Cornell and the London School of Economics. Tsai became DPP chair in 2008 after holding several top government positions. She first ran for president back in 2012, but was narrowly defeated by incumbent president Ma Ying-jeou of the KMT. 2016 was Tsai's year. Not only did she win the presidency, she also led her party to a landslide victory in the legislature. The honeymoon didn't last, though. In 2018, her party was routed in midterm elections, and she stepped down as party chair. Internal party politics have also posed a challenge. In 2019, her own former premier, William Lai, challenged her for the DPP's presidential nomination in a bruising primary contest. 2020 will see Tsai say farewell to current Vice President Chen Jianren, who is not seeking a second term. In his place, she's chosen former Premier William Lai, who is now on the same team with her once again. As president, Tsai has forged a new road for Taiwan with regard to her China policy. In a departure from previous presidents, she rejected the so-called 1992 consensus. Under that policy, both Taipei and Beijing agreed in principle that they are both part of one China, while agreeing to disagree about what one China means. China has responded by blocking Taiwan from participating in international organizations, sharply restricting Chinese tourism to Taiwan, and luring away Taiwan's diplomatic allies. In the realm of foreign affairs, Tsai has shifted attention to Southeast Asia, South Asia, Australia, and New Zealand under the new southbound policy. On the domestic front, Tsai has gotten both praise and pushback for reforming labor laws and the nation's debt-ridden pension system. She aims to phase out nuclear power in Taiwan and has addressed Taiwan's authoritarian past, seeking transitional justice. During her time in office, Taiwan also became the first country in Asia to pass same-sex marriage. Saturday's election will see voters deliver their verdict on 4 eventful years with Tsai Ing-wen at the helm.
You're watching Taiwan Insider Decision 2020, and we are bringing you live coverage of the presidential and legislative elections right here from our studios at RTI in Taipei. I'm Natalie So.
And I'm Andrew Ryan, and we're going to cut straight to our results to give you an idea of what's happening right now in the vote. We're getting a feed here from CTS. On the upper left-hand corner, you can see the official results from the Central Election Commission with President Tsai, the incumbent, ahead by about 200,000 votes. Is that right?
That's
My math isn't great.
690,000.
And then on the right, now on the left, as you can see there now, this is actually the projections. And the way that we get these projections is the Kuomintang has observers, and they are sending their results to CTS. And these are thought to be pretty close to accurate. Right now, President Tsai, according to these projections, is ahead about 3.4 million to almost 2.4 million, so ahead by nearly 2 million votes. Now, we are here in the studio with Professor Xiaoru Shirley Lin from UVA, a political economist. And I just want to get an idea from you. 2 million votes ahead by President Tsai. It seems like she's pulling ahead by a larger margin. You said you were surprised that she wasn't even farther ahead. Do you think this is a little bit closer to where you thought she might be?
Well, I think the presidential election, to me, is somewhat less important given the prediction before the election. The legislative election, I think, is going to be absolutely key because with a divided government, it doesn't really matter who is president. You can't get anything done. And more importantly, without legitimacy and a very strong base, which is what's happening in the UK and the United States. If you are divided as a country, you won't be able to negotiate internationally. And for a small place like Taiwan, that is absolutely important, that there's not only a landslide for the president, whoever it may be, but also a legislature that is going to go along with the government, the executive branch.
So what do you think are the major factors affecting people's votes this time?
Well, if you had asked me, Natalie, a year ago, I would be completely shocked at what's happening. As many of the viewers may know, in 2018 November, there was a midterm local elections, we call it, and KMT won in a landslide. At that point, the prediction was completely different. And that is because after 2 years of governance, I think that many people, including especially young people today as well, are not satisfied with DPP government's governance. attempt to create reforms, to lead reforms that are very much needed, were poorly designed and badly implemented.
So you're talking about labor reform and also pension reform, things like that.
Yes,
Which
yes.
have actually been unpopular with a large number of people, specifically the pension reform, which affects people who are in the government, people who are military.
People like myself,
Oh, really?
teachers. Yes.
Teachers, yeah.
Teachers are very, very unhappy. And as you know, teachers are one of the most respected profession. Primary and secondary school teachers work very hard and are paid very little, and the pension is the least, they would say, and military, retired servicemen. So I think that there are many marginalized groups or disenfranchised groups that are very angry at the DPP, and even if they don't support everything that Han Kuo-yu stands for, they are willing to consider voting for the KMT. So that is one issue, is domestic issues. But of course, as we all know, the surprise was very much changed. I would say from January, when Xi Jinping became assertive and moved the focus to cross-strait relations. And then in June, as we know, June 9th, June 12th, and then it went on and on. The Hong Kong protests continue such that especially the younger generation in Taiwan said that this race is about cross-strait relations, that Taiwan cannot become Hong Kong.
So she's leading right now in spite of the fact that she's had a somewhat unpopular policies through her first term.
Yes.
Hong Kong has actually worked in her favor.
Well, I think cross-strait relations and Hong Kong are very important, but let's not forget the point that as a political economist, I often remind people the economy is doing very well. The stock market, as well as Taiwan's economic prospect. It was the leader in 2019 and is estimated to also be the leader in 2020 among the four Asian tigers.
Actually, we have a graph of that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Take a
wonderful.
look at the Su Zhentang, our premier's picture of the quarter three, the Asian tigers, and
that's
we are
great.
leading.
So this is
So-
on Facebook, and it says there, we've translated it for you, it says the third quarter economic growth rate for Taiwan was 2.91%, as compared with the other three Asian tigers, South Korea at about 2%, Singapore less than 1% there, and also Hong Kong has negative growth. And this is actually the second quarter in a row that Taiwan posted the highest economic growth rate of all of the Asian tigers. So, I mean, it seems like on a number of different economic indicators, Taiwan is actually doing quite well. Wages have slightly started to grow a little bit. We're also seeing a high stock market. We're seeing...
We have a lot of returning Taiwanese investment, actually about 24 billion US dollars because of the US-China trade war. Actually, a lot of trade diversion and returning investment. So that's working in Taiwan's favor.
Yes, but it's very interesting what you've all raised, because it's a double-edged sword. Basically, many people will say that the new southbound policy, Tsai's attempt to diversify Taiwan's economic relationship, the KMT would say it will be disastrous, if not already.
And we should say the new southbound policy is basically an attempt to build ties, economic and otherwise, with Southeast Asia, with South Asia, also with Australia, New Zealand, and so it's disastrous. Why?
Well, because the attempt to reduce reliance on China, in KMT's view, is simply going against the market. And to a certain extent, I would say that may be true, but it's more likely because I would say that Beijing wants to penalize Taiwan. So Beijing has cut off relations, official relations with Taiwan ever since the DPP came into power in 2016, and the DPP won in a landslide in 2016, which is further angering Beijing. And as a result, tourist numbers have dropped immediately over several tranches of policy change, and the number of international students, which includes mainland Chinese students, on a mutually negotiated basis, also have stagnated. And all of these things, you could look at it two ways. The KMT way of looking at it, according to Han, is if we only have a good relations with China, we would not be penalized. And the DPP's version is, you see now how dangerous it is to overly rely on one economic partner. So you could see the logic of both perspectives.
And what do you agree with as an economist?
I think from a business point of view, a country is like a company. You can't depend on one customer, because what if something goes wrong with the customer?
Right.
And so I would say the flip side is Chinese economy is slowing down, is going through a lot of changes because of the trade war. And so you could also say that Tsai has benefited, the DPP's platform has benefited from the trade war. But I think there are many other reasons that are conflated with that.
I want to toss now to a question from a listener. This is a question from a viewer. This is from Arnaud Bonzon. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Should we expect a Chinese reaction in the coming days if Tsai is reelected?
It's a very good question.
I think Beijing is ready. They've seen the polls. In most of my conversations in Beijing, they always know the polls as well as, if not better, than most of us everywhere
inside
else.
Sources, probably.
They have many specialists who know everything about the trends of national identity, about electoral polls. So I don't think it's a surprise. But I think that we are, of course, all watching all over the world as to how Beijing will deal with it. Because Taiwan, you have to appreciate, used to be the number one priority, national interest for China. But I think today China is grappling with many other kinds of pressure, and they need to think about it in the context. As you know, the trade war is at just a few hours ago. Statements were made, and U.S. and China are moving forward, if you will, to get past the trade war, although it's, I think, unlikely going to be resolved anytime soon. And I think that their statement with regards to Taiwan after what's happened in Hong Kong, let's all hope will be more moderated. But one of the, I think, biggest issue for Beijing is to not recognize the electoral results means that they are denying the rights of Taiwanese, voters' views, and they've had to deal with it since 2016.
Do you think they're going to continue to use the same tactics like luring away allies? We've lost 7 allies during Tsai's first term, and also trying to isolate Taiwan internationally, trying to pressure people not to recognize Taiwan, companies and sports organizations and all kinds of
Yeah, so the question is whether it's the NBA or the Vatican. Those are the questions you're talking about. Will the Vatican forsake Taiwan for millions more Catholic believers in China, or will companies be squeezed to drop Taiwan from their pull-down list when they buy airplane tickets or make hotel reservations? China actually, interestingly, for the last 3 decades, have really not changed their strategy of basically providing sweeter carrots and bigger sticks. And if the results are what we see now at 6:28 p.m. With such a lead, I think Beijing either has to double down on the strategy that hasn't worked for 30 years, or reassess and try to find a long-term strategy to appeal to Taiwanese young voters.
So we're not going to cut to our results right now because we're avoiding commercials. We want to bring you 3 hours ad-free. But I will tell you right now that the projections show that President Tsai has about 3.7 million votes to Han Kuo-yu's nearly 2.6 million votes. So about 1 million votes ahead.
Why don't we turn to our profile of Han Kuo-yu and let our viewers know about the biggest rival for Tsai Ing-wen and his background and how he got started in politics. Let's take a look at that video.
Han Kuo-yu was born in Taiwan in 1957. He received a master's degree in East Asian Studies from National Zhenzi University. Han was elected lawmaker in 1993 for 3 consecutive terms that lasted nearly a decade. In November 2018, Han returned to politics, surprising even his own party by winning the mayorship of Kaohsiung, a DPP stronghold. His charismatic style helped him become the first KMT politician to hold the office in 20 years. In March 2019, Han led a delegation to Hong Kong, Macau, and China to promote agricultural exchanges. While in Hong Kong, he became the first Taiwanese politician to visit the Chinese Liaison Office in the city. Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council, or MAC, called Han's meetings with Chinese officials extremely inappropriate and introduced rules to regulate trips to Hong Kong and Macau by mayors, county chiefs, and political appointees. Although Han did not officially join the KMT presidential primary, he won by a big margin in a series of opinion polls in July, which the party used to select its candidate. At a KMT party congress in New Taipei City, Han said the presidential race was crucial to the survival of the Republic of China, which is the official name of Taiwan's government. If elected, Han has promised to build a country that is safe and rich. Han chose former Premier Simon Tsang as his running mate. At a press conference, Han said Tsang's extensive experience in government, industry, and academia made him the perfect choice. In late December, one day after Han marked his first year in office, a civic group filed a petition with the Central Election Commission to have him recalled as mayor. The group accused Han of relying on China-friendly media to boost his popularity. They also criticized him for taking a 3-month leave of office to run for president less than a year into his term as mayor. Hundreds of thousands of people hit the streets of Kaohsiung on December 21st in 2 separate rallies showing opposition and support for Han.
You're watching live coverage of the election results here in Taiwan. This is Taiwan Insider Decision 2020. I'm Andrew Ryan.
I am Natalie So. We're actually here every Thursday giving you a whole week's of news and features, so do join us then. But we're excited to bring you the latest in the presidential and legislative election results. Let's take a look at what's happening right now.
Let's look at the results
Yes.
on CTS.
No, actually not that.
We go to the results
on CTS.
first.
So we see that Taiwan is in the lead with about 3.78 million votes, and Han Kuo-yu is second with about 2.6 million votes. James Song has about 290,000 votes. And with the legislative election right now,
For the party vote, right? This is
the district vote.
Bufenchu is for party vote.
Oh, that's party vote. Okay.
Right. So this is not on your screen. I'm just going to tell you what we have right now is the of the 34 seats in the 113-seat legislature. It looks like the KMT, if they continue at this, the DPP, if they continue at this rate, will get about 37% of those. The KMT, 33%. The TPP, the Taiwan People's Party, that's the Taipei Mayor Ko Wen-je's party, is at about 10% of the party vote. And then the NPP, the New Power Party, is at about 6.6%. It looks like those 4 parties are the only 4 parties which will meet the 5% threshold in order to get at least 1 seat in the legislature.
At this point, I think they're still counting.
That's right, they're still
so far,
counting.
these 4 look like they're going to have seats in the legislature.
And we have a question from another viewer. This is from Kevin Kind. He's asking, how many seats does the DPP need to hold in the legislature for Tsai to avoid being a lame duck president?
That's 57, right?
I think
for a
he's
majority.
asking for her to have a mandate, right? So a majority in the legislature would be 57 seats out of
correct.
113. And we have another question here from Xin Sheng Tang. How would the PRC reassess? What are their possible options? I think that this viewer is asking, now that it looks like Tsai is going to have a second term in office, will they change the way in which they interact with Taiwan and with the president?
Well, I think Professor Shirley Lin of University of Virginia and Chinese University of Hong Kong is a good person to answer that question. Do you think that China is going to change their strategy towards Taiwan at this point?
I think it would be very wise and important for Beijing to reassess, given all of its core interests, the expanding list of interests, that it finds a new strategy, particularly because trying to benefit select members of the Taiwanese community to promote unification has not worked in the past, and using hard strategy or what we call sharp power, either misinformation, fake news, or hard power in marginalizing Taiwanese businesses or Taiwanese participation in international organization. Neither of these strategies have worked. And to reassess right now would mean to really think about whether, given that one of the silver lining, I believe, is Xi Jinping may be in the leadership position longer than other leaders in the past, maybe he can propose or think about a more long-term strategy.
He can be leader for life now, yeah?
Well, he still needs to be elected.
Right. So they've changed the rules to allow for more than one term, but he still needs to face
The
re-election.
term limit was lifted.
Yes.
So
that's right.
we did just look at a profile of Han Kuo-yu. So, and he is a new politician on the scene, fairly new, coming from last year's mayoral race, the 2018 mayoral race. Why do you think he became so popular?
Well, he really appealed to two types of people primarily. His point is, so even though, as I said, the DPP seems to have benefited from positive economic momentum, diversification, export growth, actually the lowest unemployment in 19 years. So many things are working in DPP's favor. You can argue about the cause of it. Maybe they're lucky. Maybe they did a lot that has shown a near-term result. But for Han, the point is that a lot of Taiwanese felt that their life was deteriorating, their standard of living, and wage stagnation has been for nearly 2 decades, and so in many sectors. And so Han Kuo-yu's point was, let's focus on what's important, our livelihood. So that's not a completely out of bounds sort of proposal to let's just focus on the economy and let's not quibble about other things. I'm not talking about political unification, he says. I'm just talking about let's have peace in the cross strait, in the Taiwan Strait, and we will get more economic benefits, and everyone's living standards will rise. And so his popularity comes from, first of all, groups who believe that actually China is the solution to what I call Taiwan's high income trap: slower growth, wage stagnation, increasing inequality, aging demographic, and many other problems that France, United Kingdom, Japan, we all share these problems. But Han says we have a solution. Why are we not dealing with the easy, low-hanging fruit solution? And the other group, of course, that are the diehard Han, many of them favor unification because they believe either it's inevitable, so don't fight, don't try to defy gravity, or that it's actually desirable to be part of a larger economy, a great nation. And so those are the kinds of supporters that he has. Much older than the DPP supporters. In most of the polls that you have, young people are not supportive of Han. And this has been a problem for Han throughout the campaign.
Actually, we have an interesting survey here. It's the National Students Union of Taiwan released a survey of about 11,000 people. They were all college students to see who they would vote for both president and for the party list in the legislative vote. And for the president, 85% of them said they would vote for Tsai. What we're looking at right now is actually the voter turnout for young voters. So if you see on the left-hand side there, you can see age of, you can see percentage of voting rate, so the voter turnout, and then this is for 2016. On the bottom there, you can see the age of the voters. So of course, voting age is 20 in Taiwan, and it starts off sort of high-ish. First-time voters are excited to go to the polls, but then it dips to below 60%. And then when it gets to above or close to 40 years of age, then it starts to rise all the way up until people are about 71, 74, and it maxes out at about 85% voter turnout for those two groups of people. You see male and female votes, of course, are in the different colors there. So, Shirley, I think it's interesting. Han supporters tend to be older. They also tend to be more likely to vote. So with these results that we're looking at right now, we're looking at about 4 million votes for Tsai, about 2.7 million for Han. What does this tell you, knowing what kinds of people vote for the two different candidates and the fact that Han is actually down in the polls right now, even though older people are much more likely to vote.
Yes, I think young people, more than 1 million of whom are first-time voters in this election, are going to be important. Even though with aging demographic, Taiwan has a lot more older people than younger people. I believe that age 40 to 49 is the largest group to vote.
That's true.
In 10, sort of 10-year groups. And my prediction is young people are going to be voting in record number today, because I taught at National Zhenji University last year as a guest visiting professor. And my contact with young people, and I continue to maintain contact, is that over the last few months, they feel that it's now or never. And the first-time voters are very excited to be part of this community that is going to build something very special. And unfortunately, however, this does not entirely benefit the DPP. And the reason is, as I said, many of them were swing voters in November 2018, and they are very supportive of the things that are age specific. For example, more than 70% of young people support same-sex marriage. The DPP came to lead that, and the KMT was, I would say, basically not supportive of it. And this is a very much an age divide. However, in the poll that you just cited, they also, over 37 universities, they asked them whom they would vote for president. And it was overwhelmingly Tsai for younger people. But for the party list, party support, it was actually a quarter KMT, a quarter DPP, and a quarter New Power Party. I don't think the MPP will come out so successfully, but you could see they're getting seats, and so is the Taiwan People's Party.
It looks like from that survey, the highest percentage was for the NPP at about 27%.
Exactly.
Followed by the DPP, 25%, and then it goes down from there. That's fascinating.
I think they're practical. So some of them decided not to vote for them for the party list, but in the survey they say they support it. But I think in the end, some say, well, I'm going to give my vote to the DPP perhaps. But if you look at the Taiwan People's Party, it has a very ambiguous line on cross-strait relations, but it's headed by the Taipei mayor, and he was extremely well supported by young people until the past year. Many things happened, but I think that young people want a third way out. They're not entirely satisfied the DPP or the KMT can walk the tightrope between economic integration with China and a strong relationship with the United States, which is Taiwan's security guarantor.
Very interesting.
So, but Han Kuo-yu, Mayor Han, still has a lot of fans, and they're very, very passionate. About 900,000 or 1 million came out in Taipei on Thursday. I did speak with a political commentator who explains his appeal. Let's take a look at that video clip of Donovan Smith talking about Han and why he's become popular in the past year and a half here in Taiwan.
Well, what's very interesting about him is if you watch the way that he campaigns, the way he is around people, he's very much doesn't appear to be from the background that he is. He's originally from a military family, with sort of a traditional from China sort of family, but he comes across very much as being very, very Taiwanese in his body language, in his manner of speaking. He's very ingratiating, and he's very charismatic. I mean, he's very believable as somebody you'd know. He's an uncle, he's, a friend of the family kind of guy. And when he does his campaign rallies and a lot of his activities, it's interesting to watch that he always makes sure to not appear in any way stiff or anything other than a man of the people. He always wears a blue shirt, not a suit. And, if it starts raining, he doesn't bring an umbrella at his rally. He'll just get wet. You'll notice he doesn't come in through the stage at the back. He comes through the crowd, even though that's not the smartest way to go. And it shows the crowd getting excited. And you watch his body language, the way he shakes hands with people. He's always very ingratiating.
Of coverage of the presidential elections, and here we see the latest vote count. The one on the left is from the Central Election Commission. Those are the official votes. So you see Taiwan has officially 1.9 million votes. Han Kuo-yu of the Kuomintang has over 1.2 million, and James Song has about 130,000. On the right, we see that Taiwan has projected votes of over 4 million already, and Han Kuo-yu doesn't have 3 million yet, 2.8 million. James Song way behind with 320,000. So we see a clear lead from Taiwan in the race. And this has been actually from the very beginning of the race.
Yeah, we haven't seen Tsai slip behind in the polls. Actually,
The whole day,
yet,
the whole
the whole
night,
evening,
yes.
she's been ahead. So it looks like we're heading in that direction. We're talking right now with a political economist from UVA, Sharu Shirley Lin, and we're going to move on now to a discussion of identity and how changes in the way people identify here in Taiwan may be having an impact on this year's election. Now, I want to show you another slide here. Let's put up the slide on identity. So basically what this does is it charts the changes in the way that people of Taiwan identify from 1992 on the left to June of 2019 on the right. And this is from the Election Study Center at NCCU. Now, in 1992, you can see that 46% of people in Taiwan identified as both Taiwanese and Chinese. And then in second place there, 25.5% identified only as Chinese. And then down in third place, 17.6% identified as just Taiwanese. Now, that green line there, you can see from 1992, you can trace it all the way up to last June, and it's now the number one way in which people here in Taiwan identify. 56.9% identify as Taiwanese, followed by both Taiwanese and Chinese, and then just Chinese. Only 3.6% of people in Taiwan identify only as Chinese. Now, Shirley, I'd like to ask you, what is the connection between the way people identify and the way they vote?
Yes, I am very focused on national identity as a factor in terms of economic policy. And for Taiwan, this is very integral to the discussion. But identity really, there's two things in Taiwan's actually case. One is support for unification is as important as what we call self-identification. The chart you just show is called self-identification, which is like what you fill out for a college application. You know, are you Asian? What if you're half Asian? Would you fill out you're Asian or you're not? And I think that self-identification means something, but it also depends on the viewers what they hear from the question. But it's no secret that Taiwanese, especially young people, have increasingly not identified themselves as Chinese. For over 10 years now, you see those who identify themselves as only Chinese has dropped from 25% at the beginning of the poll to 4% for a decade. However, actually in 1989, before official polls began, United Daily News had done a poll, and over 52% of Taiwanese said they were only Chinese, nothing but Chinese. Now, in terms of identity literature, this is quite unusual for a community to decide in 30 years that they want to be something different. So Taiwan has actually really bred a new generation of young people who say their identity is civic identity. They are culturally Chinese, but they believe in values that are uniquely Taiwanese. Pluralism, democracy, freedom of speech, press, and assembly. And they want to say, I'm Taiwanese in these polls. So young people polls are something that you could look at. There are many, many. One of the things that Taiwan, as a free place, has is lots of polls. And that's very important, just like unification. Now we have the most current unification poll, those who support immediate unification is less than 2%. For me, that's part of political identity, which is part of identity in general. And for Beijing, this is the report card. Looking at the identity number every day, they feel this is, if they are finding their propaganda or, let's say, soft and hard power effective on the issue of unification.
Well, they're failing their report card, right?
They have, over the years, already known that. And the question is, when you are, it's like many of us doing things. When you do it for a very long time and you've been doing it the same way, it's very hard to say, well, I'm going to fundamentally change my strategy, because what is the alternative? And of course, Beijing has many other issues that they want to deal with. And Hong Kong has also seen an identity change among young people since 2008 to now. And young people identifying themselves as Hong Konger is now higher than ever before in a similar fashion, except so accelerated. Taiwan took 30 years, and Hong Kong really has just changed in the last decade.
Do you think what's happening in Hong Kong is affecting the way China wants to deal with Taiwan as well?
It should, but we haven't seen actually.
Right. We don't know exactly what's going in their mind, but.
Yes.
And what about the national identity? Do you think this is a big reason for Tsai support here at the polls?
Yes, of course. I think for young people supporting Tsai, as I said before, whether it's young people or older people, I think older people are more ideological. So they support the KMT or DPP based on historically what those parties have been associated with. But for younger people, it's not pro-independence or pro-unification. Young people want to be Taiwanese, want to be proud of being Taiwanese, want to be participating internationally. They want to go work for the World Bank, for example. They don't want to come from a place that's not a country, not a state, a nothing place, a pariah internationally. But at the same time, they want to be like any other American student that I teach at University of Virginia. They want to work in Shanghai, in Beijing, and they don't want to be singled out and be penalized for whom they vote for. So for young people, that is very important that their identity comes first, which is actually what my last book is about. The identity is the lens through which we see the world. You can't, there's no trade-off. On that basis, you decide how to move forward in determining what's an economic interest. And I think for young people, therefore, it's very hard to imagine voting for a party that says we don't mind getting closer to China, even if it means diluting some of Taiwanese values.
So do you think that this growing national Taiwanese identity is good for Taiwan?
I think good or bad is one of the ways that Chinese scholars would talk about this. It's not a normative question. We don't have a choice. It's a bottom-up in a democracy. The people think what they think. And we can't tell them it's not good for you. So you better think differently. People feel, and this is what happened to Trump. People felt the way they felt and they voted the way they voted. But I am not making an analogy at all that Tsai is Trump. Most people would say Han is Trump-like. I think those analogies are not really relevant to Taiwan. But most importantly, identity is what you think you are and what values really define you. And it's not really important in terms of telling people you're wrong. And that's the problem with the world.
So it's impossible for an outside force to kind of change the way people identify with how they identify themselves. What's more interesting is to look at how certain candidates can tap into certain ways in which people identify.
Well, I would say the KMT had tried for 70 years, I would say for 5 decades, tried to change people's identity in Taiwan. The KMT told everybody in Taiwan they are Chinese, nothing but Chinese. It worked, but it took no time to snap out of that. So I think that top-down identity formation is another topic that scholars like us look at, and sociologists, political scientists all have different views. But I think that this is precisely the issue. Beijing believes that everything is top-down. So oftentimes when you talk about this issue of identity, Taiwanese identity growing, consolidating, the Chinese scholar think it's all textbook-based. Somebody was trying to create this, like Chen Shui-bian. And others realize that it's bottom up. It's both.
So looking at the results now, we have over 4 million votes for Tsai Ing-wen, over 3 million for Han Kuo-yu. How do you interpret what's happening in this election, Professor Lin?
Even though it looks like Tsai is winning by a big margin, I still think it means that Taiwan, in my analysis by 2010, identity was already very, very consolidated, and that most people believe they are either Taiwanese or both Taiwanese and Chinese. The majority of people think that they're just Taiwanese. However, you can see there is appeal for the KMT, and there is very strong appeal. You would say it's a minority. However, you cannot ignore those voters. So from my point of view, as a political economist, I would say that the DPP needs to look out. Are they solving people's livelihood problems? Are they giving people jobs and a future? I don't think there's very much the DPP can do about China because that's up to Beijing. The cards are in Beijing's court. But the DPP needs to develop strategies to develop better public policy, implement domestic reforms to benefit a broad spectrum of society, and look at the 3 million voters for Han Kuo-yu that you see on the screen. They need to feel like they're part of the community.
And what do you think they should do? The government, the new government, in terms of
The
economics.
DPP.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think there are many young people who ran for the legislature. The legislature this time is just fantastic. Over 650, I believe, candidates, more than ever before. And it's so wonderful that many, many young people I know actually throw themselves into this race because they want to make Taiwan a better place. Our future is with young leaders who are willing to sacrifice their own, if you will. There are many things they could have been doing. It's not easy running for office in Taiwan. And I think that the DPP needs to be a younger party, develop better public policy think tanks, and really hear the voice of people and not assume that just because they win in this election that they can just, they lack public consultation, if you will, both on cross-strait relations, on business relations, and on domestic reforms.
Great. Well, it has been wonderful talking with Professor Shirley Lin of the University of Virginia and also of Chinese University of Hong Kong. She's also the author of Taiwan's China Dilemma. She's been giving us a lot of great insights into the election.
Thank you so much for being with us.
It's wonderful to be here on this very exciting evening.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Shirley.
And if you're just joining us, this is Taiwan Insider Decision 2020. We are coming to you live from the RTI studios in downtown Taipei, bringing you rolling election coverage for 3 hours. We're just about to wrap up hour one, and I think we should toss once again to look at our results and see where the results have us right now. If you see the far left column, those are the official results coming to us from the Central Election Commission. So about 2.7 million votes for the incumbent President Tsai Ing-wen of the DPP. We have about nearly 1.8 million votes for her nearest rival, Han Kuo-yu from the KMT, and then a distant third place, 184,000 votes to James Song from the PFP. If you look at the projections, so basically this is being reported by KMT observers at the places, the polling places. We have the incumbent president Tsai Ing-wen ahead with nearly 4.5 million votes to ahead of Han Kuo-yu from the KMT with about 3 million votes. And then a distant third place is James Song again. If you add those up, that looks like about 7.5 million votes have been counted. And just a reminder that our total possible, eligible voters here in Taiwan is over 19 million. So we're not quite halfway there yet. However, I think anyone can tell that we are definitely looking at a trend that it looks like it's going to have President Tsai reelected as president.
So up in our next hour, we will be talking more about the legislature. We have with us an expert, a Fulbright scholar, Lev Nachman, who is in Taiwan studying social movements and Taiwan's smaller political parties. But before we get to that, let's take a look at some of the highlights from the policy presentations and debates. Let's take a look at that video.
Taiwan's three candidates for president shared their policies on December 18th, 25th, 27th before facing off in a debate on December 29th. At the podiums were incumbent President Tsai Ing-wen for the DPP, Kaohsiung Mayor Han Kuo-yu for the KMT, and People First Party Chairman James Song. Taiwan's sovereignty took the spotlight during the first presentation. Tsai said that in her 4 years as president, she has not made a single concession to China, nor has she given in to any pressure. Neither Han nor Tsai gave a concrete answer on future relations with China. Song said that if he's elected, he will only sit for one term. And during that term, he will not declare independence, nor would he advocate unification. During the second and third platform presentations, Han and Song set their sights on Tsai and an anti-infiltration draft bill that her administration pushed through the legislature on the last day of the year. She defended the bill, saying that many other nations are working on similar measures. She also defended her record during her first term. Han came out guns blazing in the debate with criticisms of the moderators and the media they represent.
无聊、抹黑、造谣。
His comments turned into the headline the next day in Taiwan's largest circulation newspaper, Apple Daily, which quoted him as saying a reporter for the newspaper had no scruples. One of the biggest policy issues of the night was cross-strait relations, but the debate kept coming back to the manipulation of social media. Han and Tsai criticized each other for benefiting from legions of online netizens twisting the narrative in their favor. Some of the more substantive calls came from Song, who wanted to see a State of the Nation address by the president and a cabinet where no party controls more than 40% of the seats. Tsai responded by saying she'd speak to the legislature if they call on her to do so. She was less committal on the makeup of her cabinet.
This is Taiwan Insider Decision 2020. We are bringing you live coverage of the election results here in Taiwan. Now, the polling booths closed at 4 p.m. We're now going up on the 7 o'clock hour here in Taiwan, and the election results are coming in. I'm Andrew Ryan.
I am Natalie So, and let's take a look at those election results, see what's going on right now. So in the top left corner, we see President Tsai Ing-wen has 4.5 million votes already. This is from the KMT count, and they're having people at the polling stations report back the count. This isn't the official count. And number two, Han Kuo-yu for the Kuomintang has 3.16 million votes, and James Song has 350,000 votes. So Tsai Ing-wen is leading by over 1 million right now. And
that's right. And we should mention, of course, that this is, we're not quite halfway through the count yet. If you add those numbers up, that's about less than 8 million votes, if my math isn't too far off, which means that we're still a ways to get to a possible, we don't know what the voter turnout is yet, but the total possible eligible voters is about 19 million. So we're about maybe close to halfway there, I think, at this point. If you look at voter turnout for recent years, I think voter turnout rates were in the 60s, 66%, I believe, last presidential election. The highest voter turnout rate, and this is a fun fact,
83%.
83%. That was back in 2000 when we had our first transfer of party power here in Taiwan. It's slowly gone down since then. It'll be interesting to see whether or not voter turnout goes back up with such heightened tensions and a very tense climate here in Taiwan for the campaigns. With us now in the studio, we have our social media guru, Leslie Liao. How's it going, Leslie?
Really good. You guys would not believe what's going on, at least on our streams.
What's going on?
What's happening? A million hits?
Not a million, but as for a first time Taiwan Insider Live, everyone's gotten me kind of emotional here. There's over 100 people joining us, close to 200, and people are having great conversation, great comments. I don't know, I'm trying to throw questions to you guys while you're doing the interview, and I'm trying to keep track of what everyone else is trying to say. And we got a few comments, we got a few questions. Would you guys like to hear a couple?
Yeah,
so
tell
one
us.
comment from an RTI longtime listener, Douglas North. He said a lot of good things have
He's
happened.
staying up late for this. He told us it'd be 2
2
a.m.
a.m.
in
his
America where he is. So
It must be
it's
about
3 a.m.
right
now.
now. I wonder if Douglas is still with us. He's saying a lot of good things have happened under President Tsai, especially the legalization of same-sex marriage. I hope she continues in this vein. Also, I believe we need more female world leaders.
That sounds good to me.
Female world leaders, I'm behind that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, very good.
Mike Waterford from YouTube, he wants to ask, do the hosts think Terry Guo would have gotten more support than Han?
Good
That's-
question.
That is an excellent question. Of course, Terry Guo is the former chairman of Foxconn. His company makes the components inside a lot of
Makes your
Mac and
iPhones.
Apple products.
Right.
Yeah,
He makes your
iPhones.
iPhones and iPads.
You know, I think he could have done pretty well in the elections. I mean, it's really hard to say.
I think he could have got more than Han. I think it's possible, but he was quite popular. But we don't know.
He's
you
a
know,
less
of course.
divisive character. I think just in terms of style, I think stylistically he was probably a little bit more similar to a traditional Kuomintang candidate.
Yeah.
So he might have been able to appeal to a larger range of people. We're going to have more analysts coming up in this next couple hours.
We'll
Maybe
ask
they
them.
can answer. We'll ask those
Really,
questions.
this
to
is
them.
totally outside of my expertise, you guys. My expertise is Facebook and YouTube. So
What else do you have, Leslie?
we have some really interesting. Another comment for you. Mike Waterford he says, brilliant to have this coverage in English. I don't have to bother my wife asking her what's going on. Pierre M. Basile says, best regards from Sansha, New Taipei City. Next thing was Gary Lin asks, what would the KMT's next move be to stay in the game given their low rating among the youth?
That's very interesting. It'd be interesting to see how the KMT does court a younger voter.
I hope they get more younger leaders.
I think that's,
That
I think
would
that's
help,
one of the
right?
biggest problems is they need a kind of the next generation of young leaders. They do have some people, but not as many, I think, as the DPP and some of the smaller parties who have a lot of young and interesting candidates. So maybe they need to groom their next generation of leaders.
And then with a follow-up question, Gary does asks, who is the possible rising star to run for the presidency from the DPP and KMT in coming elections?
Wow. You know what? I know the perfect person to answer that, and he's going to be coming up in this hour. We're going to have Lev Nachman, who's a Fulbright scholar and an expert on small parties. He knows a lot of the kind of the big name young people who are running for legislator this time, so he might be able to offer some suggestions. I'm going to make a note of that right now.
You like how slide that
Yeah,
question
we'll give
right
that
in
to the
right at the right
expert.
time. Timing is also one of my specialties.
Very nicely done. What else do we have?
I got one last question for you. It's how will Tsai's impending re-election affect her plans in doing the southbound policy? I hope there can be stronger ties between the Philippines and Taiwan. This one's from Mark Madrona, who's watching from the Philippines, actually.
I think she's going to continue with the southbound policy.
for sure.
And that's been going very strong in terms of cultural, business, tourism exchanges. It's been going quite well.
And just a reminder, this is Taiwan's connections with Southeast Asian nations, with South Asia, also with Australia and New Zealand. So it's basically an attempt to diversify Taiwan's interests in other parts of the world. So not just focusing on China, but kind of focusing on the rest of Asia as well. I mean, I think it's been a relatively successful so far. Ties between those countries have really gone up. We've seen a big increase in tourism from those countries. I think that, who is this, Mark?
Madrona?
Madrona. I think, there's a very good chance that ties between Taiwan and the Philippines will continue to thrive and improve assuming that President Tsai is reelected. We're still a little ways out. I don't want to put all the eggs in one basket already.
Yeah. Got 2 hours left in the stream.
That's right. 2 hours left in this stream. We're expecting to have an idea of who's won probably within the next hour. I think that President Tsai says that she's going to have a press conference at 8, and then she's going to be speaking to the nation at 8:30. So we may have an idea at that point what is going on and whether or not she will be giving a speech to, I guess, a victory speech, potentially.
Well, thanks so much, Leslie. Is that all you have? Or
Really quickly, I just want to make one more plea to the people online. Thank you guys so much for your interaction. And like I said, I am behind the computer, so I will be responding to whatever you guys do say. YouTube, Facebook, do like, share, leave a comment, tell us what you think. And my goal, 1 million confirmed viewers, guys. Let's do it.
We got a
Taiwan
ways to
Insider.
go.
Got a couple zeros to add on to that. Well, thank you.
You can do it.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Leslie.
Yeah, we look forward to talking with you more in the coming hour.
So we actually have another topic to show you. It's been a big issue here in the election cycle and in Asia. It's what's going on in Hong Kong. Let's take a look at the video highlighting what's been going on in Hong Kong for over the past 6 months.
In June 2019, over 1 million people hit the streets of Hong Kong to protest a proposed Chinese extradition law, which was withdrawn 4 months later. That figure, an estimate of organizers, represents about 1/7 of the city's population of 7.5 million. The protest began in the afternoon on Sunday, June 9th, with a 3-kilometer march to Hong Kong's Legislative Council building. The crowd did not disperse until the early hours of Monday morning. If passed, the bill would allow authorities to extradite suspects from Hong Kong to China. Hong Kong officials say they would have final say over who gets extradited. Critics say the law opens the door for Chinese authorities to poach political and business adversaries. They say that it would essentially cancel Hong Kong's semi-autonomous status. Also, the law would not only apply to Hong Kong residents. Anyone who passes through Hong Kong will be subject to extradition to China without the guarantee of a fair trial. Protesters say the law is not in the interest of the city's people. They say that local leaders are merely following the wishes of Beijing.
Hong Kong government and the Chinese government are not on an equal footing. So if Chinese government make a promise to Hong Kong and say, oh, we would not extradite political dissidents, we would ensure fair trial, and if the Hong Kong government extradite its people, its citizens, back to China, and China breach its promise, there's nothing Hong Kong government can do.
Over the past few months, the protests have turned increasingly violent, with protesters throwing petrol bombs and police firing tear gas and rubber bullets. Protesters say they will not back down unless their demands are met. The 5 demands include an independent inquiry into police brutality, amnesty for arrested protesters, no classification of protesters as rioters, universal suffrage, and Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam's resignation. In Taiwan, President Tsai Ing-wen has reiterated that the government will stand firm in its support of Hong Kongers' pursuit of freedom and democracy. She said Taiwan is deeply concerned about the situation in the former British colony, but will not intervene in the political unrest there.
You're watching Taiwan Insider Decision 2020, our live coverage of the presidential and legislative elections. I'm Natalie So.
And I'm Andrew Ryan, and we are now joined by Lev Nachman, who is a Fulbright scholar. He's also a political scientist at the UC Irvine. Welcome to the show, Lev.
Thank you so much for having me.
And now we're going to have you on to answer all those hard questions we couldn't answer a moment ago. But we're going to start off by talking about Hong Kong. We just played a video there for you of what's been happening in Hong Kong over the last 6 months. Now, recently I read some articles that you had written in which you said that you thought maybe people were overstating the importance of Hong Kong in terms of its impact on the elections this year in Taiwan.
Right. So to state it very clearly, I do think Hong Kong matters, and it matters a lot. But it's not the only thing that matters. Nor the only thing that mattered in the last year that led to Tsai's return to popularity and what seems like her victory. I think if you only look at the Hong Kong narrative, I think you miss out on a lot of really key important factors that have happened in Taiwan over the last year. Not only that, but a lot of people try to portray what's happened in Hong Kong as being the kind of only way to explain how Tsai has come back. And that's a very nice story of Taiwan-Hong Kong solidarity, and I think it's definitely part of the story, but it's not the whole story.
Well, it seems like a lot of international journalists always kind of frame everything that's happening in Taiwan in terms of what's happening in China. So that kind of is a similar narrative. If you put all of your focus on
it's a simple
Hong Kong.
explanation, right?
Yeah. People love a simple explanation.
Absolutely. And it's also very convenient. I mean, convenient might not be the right word, but if you look at Tsai's uptick, it's correlated with Hong Kong as well. But as we always say in social sciences, correlation does not equal causation. And I think that's something really important to keep in mind when we look at Hong Kong.
And now you had actually looked at some of the surveys of polling, right? And you had looked at specifically the dates at which things had happened in Hong Kong. What did you notice?
So none of the major events in Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, obviously the protests have been constant over the last, what feels like a year, but I know it's been about 8 months now. None of the major events correlate with a spike in Tsai's popularity or a drop in Han's popularity. Rather, Tsai's growth has been steady, and Han's decline fairly quick. But more importantly is if you look beyond just Tsai and Han, and you look instead at the party lists surveys that have been done to look at how people feel about certain parties, the KMT was actually well ahead of the DPP in terms of support for who you're going to vote for your party list, all the way through November. Meaning that in November, which was about 5+ months into the Hong Kong protests, the KMT was still the party that the majority of Taiwanese people supported. Which means that if the narrative that Hong Kong was pushing people towards the DPP and away from the KMT is true, then it can't explain why the KMT was still polling so well domestically.
That was for the legislature vote, though, right? Not for the presidential vote.
Not for the presidential vote.
Party
for the
list
party
vote,
vote.
right?
Exactly.
Can you actually describe for our listeners who are viewers who are just joining us what the party vote is? Because there's 113 seats in the legislature, but the party vote actually only allots 34 of the 113 seats. Well, how are those allotted?
So Taiwan's democratic electoral system is what's called a mixed system, meaning that it's composed of both what's called single-member district seats as well as proportional representation seats. So a single-member district seat is every district in Taiwan gets one person to represent that district. The way that that person wins is by getting more votes than the other person.
Winner takes all.
Winner takes all.
Okay.
And the majority of seats, about 2/3 of the seats in the Legislative Yuan are reserved for those seats. 6 seats are reserved for indigenous seats. And the final 34 seats are reserved for what's called proportional representation. So when you vote in Taiwan, you vote 3 times. You get 3 ballots. You vote for the president, your local district representative, and then your final vote is for whichever party you want to support. And the reason this is a good system is because, say, there's a DPP and a KMT candidate only in your district, but you're a New Power Party supporter. But there's no New Power Party candidate. Well, one way you can still vote for and give actual support to the party is by voting for them on the party list.
Okay.
Now, the rules are a bit complicated, but the way it works is that a party must receive 5% of the total proportional representation votes in order to get someone into the legislature.
To get at least 1 seat, right?
2 seats, guaranteed starting with 2 seats.
Oh,
you cannot
really?
get just one. You start with 2.
Okay. So you need to get about like 2.5%-ish to get 1 seat. But you have to get
5%.
No, you have to exceed 5% to
what I'm
even
saying
qualify.
is each of those seats is worth about 2.5% of the total party vote.
And we have 19 of them.
And
right
there
here,
are
right?
19 parties on the
19
ballot
parties
this year.
vying for those
I don't know if
seats.
you can see this. This might be a little bit hard to our
It's okay.
cameraman. This is kind of like what we call the ballot. It's what it looks like is the ballot that you would get. Of course, it's a small version, and you have
Yeah,
all
the
of
black
the
and white version, too.
parties lined up there, and then you just basically put a little stamp in the top row here in one of these little boxes above the party that you like. I apologize for that small prop that we have there. We weren't planning on doing that.
And another fun fact, there are over 350 registered parties in Taiwan.
Wow.
So
that's
the
a
fact
lot.
that only 19 made it on the ballot is actually
That's nice. That'd be
least
too
there's
many
only
to have.
19.
Yeah, really.
Right. So my question for you then is, of these 19 parties, how many are expected, do you think, to get above the threshold of 5% and get at least 2 party seats?
So obviously the KMT and the DPP. Ko Wen-je's party, the
TPP.
Taiwan Minzhongdang, the TPP, I think is very likely to. I think when I last checked the polls, they were at 10%, which means they'll that's good for at least 3 to 4, maybe 3 or 4, depending on how the rest do. And then the New Power Party, Shidai Liliang, will also likely pass the threshold. I think they actually already have passed the threshold.
I think they have. They have like 6.6% in our last, report.
Then that's certainly going to get them at least 2, if not 3 seats. There's one other important number, though, with proportional representation, and that's 3.5%.
Okay.
So the reason 3.5% is important is because that gets you state funding for your party.
Oh.
So even though you don't get someone in the Legislative Yuan, you at least pass a threshold where it at least helps fund your party for the next
How
amount of
much
time.
money, Lev?
I don't know.
I
don't know.
So Leslie, our social media guru over there, I'm going to toss you that question. Can you find out how much money you get in state funding if you get over 3.5%?
3.5.
3.5, right? Of the party vote.
Actually, we do have a video of the parties that you mentioned, the TPP, the NPP. We have a nice video highlighting them coming onto the scene and what's been going on with them. Let's take a look at that video right now.
The Taiwan People's Party, or TPP, is one of Taiwan's newest parties. Taipei Mayor Ko Wen-je founded it last August. The outspoken mayor said the TPP will prioritize things that benefit all of Taiwan and the well-being of the people. On the diplomatic front, the party calls for a pragmatic approach to ensure Taiwan's survival and sovereignty. As of last October, the party had less than 6,000 members. Ke, a surgeon-turned-politician, received support from the DPP during his run for Taipei mayor in 2014. But his relations with the DPP have soured in recent years, partly due to his stinging criticism of the DPP government's policies and his decision to run for re-election as Taipei mayor against a DPP candidate in 2018. It is expected that his party, the TPP, will shake up Taiwan's political landscape, which has long been dominated by the DPP and the KMT. The Formosa Alliance is a political coalition that was restructured as a political party last July. That's after a pro-independence group split off from the Democratic Progressive Party in 2018. The Formosa Alliance is calling for a referendum on Taiwan independence and is pushing the idea of re-entering the United Nations under the name Taiwan, instead of the country's formal name, the Republic of China. The party is anti-communist, particularly in light of the threat posed by China against Taiwan. Last September, former Vice President Annette Lu, a DPP member, announced her decision to run for president as an independent backed by the Formosa Alliance. Lu, however, withdrew from the race 2 months later after failing to gather the required number of signatures. And finally, the New Power Party, or NPP, was founded in January 2015. Later that year, the party elected Huang Guocang, a legal scholar known for his lucid political discourse, as its chairperson. A year later, in the 2016 legislative elections, the NPP won an impressive 5 seats, making it the third largest political party after the DPP and the KMT. But in 2019, the NPP faced its first crisis. An outspoken lawmaker who rose to fame as a heavy metal singer, Freddie Lim, withdrew from the party because he was unhappy with the NPP's political stance. That's because some party members support the TPP and others support the DPP. Now Lim is running for lawmaker as an independent, and he openly supports the DPP's president, Tsai Ing-wen. Lim is not the only high-profile figure to leave the party. Another NPP lawmaker, Hong Tzu-yong, left less than 2 weeks later.
If you're just joining us, we are bringing you live rolling coverage of the election results here in Taiwan. This is Taiwan Insider Decision 2020. I'm Andrew Ryan.
I am Natalie So. We are also here with Lev Nachman. He is a Fulbright scholar studying smaller parties here in Taiwan, an expert on the small political parties. And we actually have a question about that from Ryan Jelinek. He says, can you explain the rationale behind requiring small parties to get 5% rather than 3.4%?
So every electoral system has different rules. In 2008 is actually when Taiwan established the change in their rules that led to 5% and this number of PR seats being even established. The long story short is essentially you need a cutoff point. Otherwise, you would be having a
lot of
one-seat parties.
A lot of disagreement.
And a lot
what's
of
wrong with that, though?
The 5% is to guarantee at least 2 seats so that they actually have proper representation rather than just having one person per party. Obviously, I think if some people have the opinion that it should be lower to allow for more parties, I think that's a totally valid opinion. At the same time, having kind of not a high threshold, but a threshold of, say, 5%, at least shows that those in formal power have an actual voice within the populace. That at least 5% of the total population actually want someone from that party. So say if only a party only got 2.5%, well, that's not very much. So why should a party with only 2.5% get actual representation?
Right, yeah.
So and again, if 5%, why not 4%? If 4%, why not 3%? But I think it's, again, like at some point when you're deciding these rules, you have to make a decision about what is considered fair.
I want to show you actually a map of Taiwan and show you all the different types of seats in the legislature. Let's pull up slide number 11 right now and show you that. So basically, this is from 2016. This is the legislative election results. And you can see the green parts of the map of Taiwan. Those are all DPP seats. And then the blue seats are the KMT And then you have a little smattering of smaller parties. You have the yellow, which is the NPP, and you have the, is that reddish orange seats? You have other independents there, basically. Actually, right now in the legislature, the DPP has 68 seats, the KMT has 35 seats. Small parties and independents have about 11 seats. Now you see there's a little box down at the bottom there. It says party list. Those are the 34 seats which are allotted by this proportional representation vote, which we have been talking about. So I want to come back to you, Lev, now with some more questions about these small parties. And actually, I want to give you some kind of the latest results on the breakdown of which parties, how the different parties are doing in the legislative elections for the party vote for those 34 seats. So we have, that looks like the largest number is going to go to the DPP if this lasts. Right now, they've got about 35%, KMT 33%, NPP, the New Power Party, 7%, and then the TPP, the Taiwan People's Party, at about 10%. Again, that's Taipei Mayor Ko Wen-je's party, recently established party. What do you think of these results so far?
There's so much to say about these numbers right now.
You could write an essay.
Yeah. So let's start with the DPP and the KMT numbers. So as of now, assuming that these numbers hold with Tsai Ing-wen and Han Kuo-yu, Tsai Ing-wen is won by, I think it's going to be a landslide. But if we look at these party votes, the DPP is not winning by a landslide. In fact, 35 and you said 33.
That's less than before. That's
very close.
Right.
Yeah.
And this says a lot about how people feel about the party versus how they feel about Han Kuo-yu as a candidate. I was saying online earlier today that I think if Han Kuo-yu loses by a lot, and it seems like he's going to lose by a lot, that this is the KMT and blue voters in general rejecting Han as a candidate, not necessarily rejecting the KMT as a party. And I think the proof of that is the KMT still getting 33% of the party votes, which is very close to what the DPP got.
So then can we ask then conversely, if we're looking at the DPP numbers, if it's only 35%, what are voters saying with that?
I think that's an excellent point. Part of my own research has looked at youth political participation and especially activist attitudes towards the DPP. And what I hear overwhelmingly is, I'm going to vote for Tsai Ing-wen, but it doesn't mean that I support the DPP. A lot of young voters, and especially activists connected to, say, the Sunflower Movement, want change in their political choices. That's what these third parties offer them.
We should mention that the Sunflower Movement took place for three weeks in 2014. Well, actually, it was much longer than that. But the main gist of it is that for 3 weeks, young student leaders held the legislature. They took over the legislature and stayed in there for about 3 weeks, basically to voice their opposition to, I believe it was an agreement with China, a trade pact. So these new third force parties, which parties do those include? These are parties that formed after the student movement, right?
And this is my own opinion is that Ko Wen-je's party, Minzhongdang, is not really included with post-Sunflower parties.
Okay.
Now, my reason for that is post-Sunflower parties, those third force parties, are explicitly pro-independence, pro-progressive social values, and Ko Wen-je's party is neither of those.
Okay, interesting.
In fact, Ko Wen-je's party only formed this last year, while the majority of post-Sunflower third force parties formed immediately after Sunflower within a year. So even though Ko Wen-je's party is a third party, it's not necessarily a third force party.
What's the difference? I mean, what is the third force party then?
So a third force party being a pro-independence,
okay,
pro-progressive values out of the Sunflower Movement.
And the third party is just another choice.
It's another party. So, for example, the People's First Party, James Song's party, is not a third force party, but it's a third party.
Okay.
So my understanding is that a lot of these third force parties, they are actually built around a specific issue. So, for example, you have the Green Party, which is kind of more closely related to environmental issues. You have, or the Trees Party, I believe, is one, or the Labor Party is related to labor issues. They seem to be issue related, whereas the TPP is actually more centered not on an ideology or a specific issue, but on an individual in the same way that the PFP is.
And I would push back just a little bit. The Labor Party actually has a very separate development from most third force parties. And the Green Party actually predates most third force parties
That's
by
right.
a long time.
Yeah, that's right.
Really, the third force parties like the NPP, the Social Democratic Party, which isn't very relevant this election, and parties like the State Building Party are very explicitly pro-independence and pro-social values. Now, the pro-independence, or even just saying more broadly pro-Taiwan sovereignty, is something that the DPP is pro-Taiwan sovereignty. I wouldn't say the DPP is necessarily pro-independence in the same way that State Building Party or the New Power Party are. But what these third force parties offer are progressive values beyond just whether or not you feel Taiwan ought to be an independent country or not.
So what kind of an impact do you think they have had on the legislature in Taiwan since they've been created?
So the New Power Party definitely took Taiwan by storm last election by getting not quite 7%. And if the latest numbers have them over 7%, that means they did better this election than they did last election
Right, and
in
they
terms
had
of the
5
PR.
seats too last
Now,
election, right?
of course, it's worth mentioning that 3 of those 5 seats were single-member district seats, and the NPP is not going to win any of their single-member district races.
We've been watching the results, and this is something that you've already noticed on the screen, the results screen.
Their numbers are so low they don't have a chance. But the fact that they were able to still get 7.5% of the proportional representation vote. I mean, if you've been following the NPP the last kind of 6 months, this makes sense. The NPP has put all their eggs in the PR basket. So the majority of their advertisements have nothing to do with their single-member district candidates. It's all about their party list.
Interesting. Why that strategy?
Because they realize that none of their single-member district candidates have a chance.
Wow.
And they also lost a couple people, right? So can you tell us about that?
The NPP had a rough year. And the fact that they were still able to pull 7.5%, I'm still processing this, but it's just like, that's very impressive as a party. The main, 2 of the main founders of the party, or not necessarily founders, but original members of the NPP, Freddie Lim and Hong Ziong, who are both running for re-election, and I am looking at the screen, and I think they're doing okay. I haven't seen the latest numbers. But they were both originally members of the New Power Party. They're one of the original cohort of the party, and they have since left the party. Now, there's a lot of reasons why the NPP had a lot of trouble this last year. The most vocal reason that I think got the most media attention was whether or not the NPP was going to cooperate with the DPP. Now, the reason this is an issue is because in 2016, they did cooperate with the DPP. So the way they won 3 single-member district seats last election is because the DP did not contest them. The DPP, let them run, and let is a little bit of a strong word because.
But they had a discussion about it, right?
They talked about it. They talked it through. We're going to coordinate. We're going to endorse each other's candidates, and we're all going to be good. And then 4 years later, this issue came up about whether or not the NPP was going to continue this relationship with the DPP, or whether or not they wanted to kind of stake their own claim and differentiate themselves away from the DPP.
Now, the people who stayed in the NPP, they were considering supporting another party, yes? Some of them were interested in supporting the TPP.
So not necessarily supporting the TPP, but they were open to kind of strategic cooperation with the TPP. Now, in the end, they didn't. In fact, the TPP and the NPP are very much competing over some of the same votes. So there's a specific kind of voter that we call a protest voter, someone who votes purely because they don't want they want to send a signal of protest to whoever party they might actually support, and a lot of third parties get protest votes. So, for example, if you look at someone like James Song, he's probably getting a lot of protest votes from people who might normally vote for the KMT, but would like to signal to the KMT that they're not satisfied. So we're going to vote for James Song to signal this dissatisfaction. Now, a lot of voters, in particular young voters, look at parties like the TPP and the NPP as options to signal protest. Now, those voters are a little bit tricky to kind of conceptualize because they might not necessarily be voting based off of policy preferences or ideological values. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the TPP and the NPP is outspokenly pro-independence and the TPP is not. And if you are someone who identifies as a pro-independence supporter, then you're probably more likely to go with the NPP and not the TPP.
We have so many parties that have T's, P's,
And P's and
D's.
D's. No, it's very confusing.
It's hard to keep everything straight.
Shall we get back to the results?
Yes.
Take a quick look and let people catch up with the results here. We see that Tsai Ing-wen has projected votes of 5.3 million. That's way ahead of Han Kuo-yu with 3.7 million, and James Song has 410,000. So that's a big lead. Lev, what do you think of Tsai's lead? What do you think this is telling us here?
It's hard not to call that a landslide. I mean, if she ends up winning by 2 million votes, which I did, not everyone is in yet, but just have this very strong 1.5 million, if my math isn't terrible.
Right, and still early, right?
And still, what is this? Do we know what percentage this is of the total voting population?
Less than about over 50% right now.
Yeah,
So-
that's very. Wow.
It's a big lead. Let's talk a little bit about the legislature and some of the bigger parties, and maybe not just the party vote. I want to talk a little bit about whether or not you think the DPP or the KMT will get a majority in the next legislature. And again, it's a total of 113 seats, and it doesn't matter what kind of seats we're talking about. All of the seats combined together, 113 seats. You need 57 in order to have a majority in the legislature. Do you think either the KMT or the DPP will get that majority?
So it's still early, and I'm not sure I can say for certain just based off of what the PR votes look like right now. I think a lot of races, it seems like the DPP is pulling ahead. That I think I'm more optimistic right now that they are going to maintain a majority. But it also depends on the number of seats from PR that the TPP and the NPP take. Because both the TPP and the NPP have signaled that they're not necessarily going to align or caucus with the pan-green parties, be it the DPP or any other one on kind of the pan-green. So what that means is that going forward, depending on how many TPP or NPP politicians make it in, there's going to be, I'm guessing, 4 or 5, probably 4 or 5 that could be up in the air about who they're going to support.
So do you think they're going to be like the kingmaker, the decision maker in the
It depends on the
legislature?
rest of the races. So if the DPP ends up doing well, which just looking at the results seemed like they are going to do well, then their role becomes less important. So if the DPP can naturally pull ahead, it's going to be okay. If it's a close tie between the DPP and the KMT, then those 5 or however many third force candidates become that much more important.
Now, in the video we showed you a little bit earlier, we talked about 3 different small parties which are making the headlines. One was the NPP, one was the TPP. The third party, I was thinking maybe you could also comment on, is the Formosa Alliance. What's your observation of that party?
So the Formosa Alliance formed earlier this summer, and to trace the Formosa Alliance, you have to go a little bit farther back to March, to when the DPP primary first happened. So this is back when Tsai's popularity is still much lower than Han Kuo-yu. That's about the time when it starts to switch, but it's about then that we start to see it switching, but at the time Tsai is still low. So a lot of members of the Deep Green coalitions did not support or approve of Tsai Ing-wen for a number of reasons. But a lot of those reasons kind of were either based in kind of false understandings of Tsai and her policies, were either gender or sexist reasons to not like Tsai Ing-wen, or a number of them were, oh, please go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. You're saying gender or sexist, but they also were then fielding former Vice President Annette Lu as a possible presidential candidate.
And
how does that work?
And Annette Lu herself is not necessarily the most progressive of candidates. She herself has made many homophobic remarks and many what I would consider racist remarks towards indigenous people in Taiwan.
but she's female.
But she is. But
So
for
gender
example,
issue
I
is-
remember that the way that they talk about Tsai Ing-wen was still very gendered. For example, they would refer to William Lai, the now vice presidential candidate, who ran against Tsai for the position as young William against old Mother Tsai, despite the fact that they're practically the
About
same
the
age.
same age.
And the Formosa Alliance was, at the end of the day, it was an anti-Tsai Ing-wen party. It is an anti-Tsai Ing-wen party.
Do they have any hope of getting any seats this time around?
No, I think
No chance.
they're not going to get 0.5%.
Okay.
Well, I'm
Interesting.
curious about the TPP. That looks like the big up and coming small party. What do you expect from them?
So this is a very good question. And my answer right now is I'm eager to find out. Because TPP politicians so far have not really indicated that they're necessarily all together about what exactly their party platform is. And until we really know how they feel about really important issues like independence unification, it's really hard to say what's going to happen to the party. Now, of course, Terry Gou has endorsed many of their politicians. He and Ko Wen-je have indicated that they are interested in working together.
Again, Terry Gou is the former Foxconn chairman, the guy who makes your iPhone. Yeah.
And Terry Gou challenged Han Kuo-yu for the KMT position. So it's not a secret that Terry Gou is a blue politician with deep ties to the KMT and a lot of ties to the CCP as well, because of his business practices in China. So when you have someone like Terry Gou supporting your party, but the party insists that it's neither pro-unification or pro-independence, it's difficult to take that claim necessarily very seriously. And so far, none of the TPP's candidates have really had their feet held to the fire about this issue. And I'm guessing that in the next 4 years, they're definitely going to.
Well, it's interesting. Taipei Mayor Ko Wen-je, during his mayorship, has actually been relatively successful in being a chameleon, I think, in terms of his approach to cross-strait policy. Like, I think he's attempted to engage China with the two cities forum, the Shanghai Taipei forum. So he's kind of found his own way through that. It'll be interesting to see how he continues to navigate that, and whether he's clearer about it.
I mean, this is very controversial isn't the right word, but I know for certain a lot of, say, sunflower activists no longer support Ko Wen-je, but they did when he first came out as mayor, because he made a lot of appeals to sunflower activists and kind of the sunflower cohort as trying to be one of them. He even endorsed Freddie Lim during his first campaign. Freddie endorsed him as well. So everyone thought he was kind of a green-leaning politician. 4 years later, he's working with Terry Gou, talking about ties with China. He had his very infamous saying, two sides of the straight, one family, which definitely lost him a lot of youth support. And now he no longer seems like a potentially green politician. He seems much more like a blue politician. So again, I'm very eager to see where he goes from here now that he's actually managed to get his party into parliament.
So let's turn once again and look at our results as they continue to come in. On the upper left-hand corner there, we have the results, the official results from the Central Election Commission, which puts the incumbent President Tsai Ing-wen in first place with about nearly 5.7 million votes. Quite a distance ahead of the second place finisher, who's in second place right now, Han Kuo-yu from the KMT with about 3.7 million votes. And down there in third place, a distant third place, we have James Song from the PFP with about 400,000 votes. Then again, of course, if you look on the right-hand side, this is interesting. Looks like the KMT projections have actually fallen behind a little bit, fallen behind the Central Election Commission's current tally. So I think that basically the two are starting to catch up to each other. The Central Election Commission's, nearing the projections in terms of the total number of votes for each candidate that we see there.
And that's about 50% of the eligible voters right now, over 9 million. So there's 19 million eligible voters.
And that's if everyone were to vote, right?
Right, that's 9, yeah. So we'll see how many votes are still to come in within the next hour or so.
And just an idea of voter projections, we do have some nice turnout figures for the past several years. The highest turnout was back in 2000 when President Chen Shui-bian from the DPP won the presidency, and we saw the first transfer of power between political parties in Taiwan's history. There was 82% turnout that year. Now that voter turnout rate has slowly dropped off over the years. And the most recent presidential election in 2016, voter turnout was about 66.3%, which as an American, I think is a huge turnout Are you surprised by the voter turnout here in Taiwan, Lev?
Always, but that's my American bias kicking in. I mean, I'm based in Orange County when I'm back in California, and our youth turnout rate in Orange County is so abysmal. I'm not sure it went
What is
over
it?
20%
Really?
during Trump's election.
Wow.
I have to check that, but it was definitely just tragically low, which is why in Taiwan, when I see, such as in the last election, youth turnout was still the lowest number of any age cohort at still over 50%.
Wow.
Wow. Americans
People
should
love
take note.
elections here. People,
People
love to
elections
vote.
here. People love to vote.
We feel
It's
powerful when we
amazing.
vote. We feel
Yeah.
empowered.
It's great to be in a place where voting is taken so seriously.
Yeah, it's a great place to study.
And this youth vote actually
Politics.
is incredibly important because I think it's really going to tell us a lot about how well the DPP managed to use Hong Kong to try to encourage young people to vote. How well it used rebranding Tsai as a very connected with the youth kind of politician. So once the demographics come out and we see just how many young people came out to vote, that's really going to tell us a lot about how the DPP ran their campaign.
We actually have a very interesting survey about the values of people supporting Tsai and Han. Can we take a look at that slide? It's
Let's look
slide
at slide
number
number
8. And there was a group that went to the rallies, went to over 20 rallies to interview people from Han and Tsai's camp.
That's right. This is
And
Reader that did this. It's an internet news source. They went to 21 campaign rallies for Han and Tsai beginning last November. They got 1,414 surveys back. One of the questions they asked was, what are the values you want for the next generation? They had to choose 2, including economic development, social order, law-abiding, democracy, freedom, and equality. And this is what Tsai supporters chose for their 2. The highest on the list there is freedom and democracy, then freedom and equality, economic development coming in distant third there. And then not even on the list, it looks like, at least not at the top 5, are things like social order and law-abiding. That doesn't mean they don't have social order and aren't law-abiding.
No, of course.
Let's move on now to what Han supporters chose, and we'll look at the difference between those 2. So you can see the things that they valued the most or hoping to give the next generation. High up there is economic development and democracy. And then higher on their lists include things like law-abiding, social order. What's interesting is, Lev, those 2 surveys show that, those 2 survey questions show that the one point of intersection for the 2 is democracy. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely a sign that, even though there are 2 very different understandings of what a Taiwanese identity is. So for some, it's a ROC identity, and for some, it's a Taiwan identity. That at least this kind of indicates that there is some shared value of democracy. This idea of economic development, or kind of giving the next generation some sort of economic success, I think it's important to note that when we talk about Taiwan politics, we always talk about how it's this independence unification political issue that kind of defines everything.
And we're going to come to that in just a second too, right?
Oh, great. And when we talk about economic development, I think it's important not to forget that you can't talk about economic development or economic success without talking about where one's preference for pro-unification or pro-independence comes into play.
That plays a big role in that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Let's move on to another slide here, number 10 here. This is for the same group. They also asked people their opinions on China, whether respondents supported independence, unification, maintaining the status quo. Now, let's look at the total there. All respondents, we have 2 large categories in the center for people who support independence or the status quo. But it's a very different story if you divide them up into Han supporters and Tsai supporters. With the Han supporters, the largest group, 68% there, support the status quo. In other words, no change in relations between Taiwan and China. But they also have a very large red box, which you don't see at the bottom there, and that is people supporting unification, 12.6% there. If you look at Tsai supporters, it's a totally different story, 73.8% supporting independence,
Wow, that's a lot.
20.8% supporting the status quo. Now, I should caution you, we have to remember that the people who responded to these are also people who showed up at political rallies. So they might be
Of course.
much more extreme in their views than the average person who would have voted for one of those two parties today.
Yeah, I think, obviously methods should be taken into account. But really, for me, the bigger thing that should be taken into account is understanding that when you ask someone what independence means and what unification means, is there is no one answer for what independence is or what unification is. In fact, understandings of these two terms varies widely across both camps.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. Can we dig into that a little bit more? What are some possible different understandings of the word independence or unification?
Of course. So kind of the two biggest kind of types of independence people talk about is this idea of Huadu, 中华民国独立, versus Taidu, which is Taiwan 独立.
And
So,
what's the difference? Can you
independence
explain?
of the Republic of China as opposed to independence of Taiwan. Okay, what is the difference?
So a independent ROC recognizes Taiwan as the ROC as an independent country,
Okay.
which means that this island, as the Republic of China, is independent from the PRC, the People's Republic of China.
Okay.
That it doesn't necessarily need a name change, a constitutional change, that it can exist within this existing ROC framework that the KMT brought over and developed, and that we now live in.
That seems to be a very small part of the population that believes in this type of independence.
Not necessarily, actually. So, for example, Tsai Ing-wen herself is very what many would describe as Huadu. So, for example, in the last week, there was a scandal within the DPP where one of their spokespersons made too overstated of a comment, or at least was perceived as too overstated by a lot of media, as being indicating that unification was, equated with treason, which again overstated. But whenever this kind of thing happens, Tsai Ing-wen has to kind of double down on her stance that she's not against any sort of China identity. In fact, she herself said that we live in 中华民国. And
Which is the Republic
which is
of
the
China.
Republic of China, and I am
Right.
the president of 中华民国.
Okay. Which is interesting because I think Han supporters and even Han Kuo-yu himself had criticized her for not saying Republic of China
Enough.
But she does say
And
that
she has for a
regularly, yeah.
long time. And so when I say things like the DPP isn't necessarily a pro-independence party, a lot of the time, my reason being is because politicians like Tsai Ing-wen and even Lai Ching-te have said repeatedly that Taiwan, 中华民国 Taiwan, 已经是独立的.
We're
Okay,
already
so
We are
independent.
already independent
Okay.
as the ROC.
So we
Okay.
don't need to declare independence.
We don't need to do
right?
anything. So, and this is arguably a bit of a pro-status quo attitude.
It is. And it's trying to satisfy the independent supporters by saying we already are, but then not rock the boat with China. Right?
Exactly. Now, versus someone who says they're Taidu.
Right.
That generally
Taiwan
infers that they want this island not to be called 中华民国, not the ROC, but Taiwan Guo, the
and
country of
that
Taiwan.
would mean changing the flag, changing all of the
Constitution,
constitution.
and that is rocking the boat.
So, what are the differences in terms of different types of unification?
So within the and this is actually something that I think is a little bit under-researched, because I think it's very interesting to ask people who support closer ties with China what it takes for unification. Now, of course, there are parties like the new party, Xindang, who I went to their rally a couple months ago. They say that unification is the only path for Taiwan, immediate unification with the PRC.
Okay.
Now, what that means is to kind of accept the PRC's framework and have Taiwan enter into the PRC as a province of the PRC.
Okay.
Now, there's another type of unification which says that I still identify as Chinese. I am a citizen of the ROC. And one day I would like to unify with China, but we're going to give them democracy. We're going to make China democratic.
I see. Okay.
Or, for example, I'm pro-unification if China democratizes.
That's a big if.
Now,
but
obviously,
that's saying, yeah.
that's a wild notion.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it shows that there are still people who are what I would describe as kind of ROC nationalists, who still value democracy, who still value Taiwan as it exists, but don't necessarily identify with those who see themselves as Taiwanese. Now, I think looking at trends and polls and opinion data, overwhelmingly, that's becoming a smaller number. There are far more people who see themselves as Taiwanese, as the ROC nationalist kind of cohort is becoming smaller and smaller and older. And those who see themselves as Taiwanese and support some form of kind of more stated independence or more sovereignty for Taiwan, that cohort is only going to grow and grow.
Fascinating. And of course, the status quo is also is a very hard term to define as well, because the status quo is actually always different depending on where we are and when we are, right?
Of course.
We have some news from the legislative race. There's a huge underdog who won from the Taiwan State Building Party, Chen Bo-wei. What do you think about that?
Chen Bo-wei's victory, seeing this is maybe, as someone who studies small parties, one of the most exciting victories that no one saw coming. I think everyone who was following his race, including most of kind of the other political scientists who follow small parties, did not see him winning.
So tell us about him and why you think he won.
So the Taiwan State Building Party, Jijindang, fielded him, and he's kind of their main candidate in one of the most difficult districts to win in all of Taichung, maybe for in a lot of Taiwan, because he's running against a KMT candidate whose family has been the representative of that district for a very long time. This is a race. This is a district that the DPP was not going to win.
Wow.
So this Taiwan, so Chen Bo-wei himself is an extremely popular up-and-coming politician. He is the star of the state building party, the Taiwan State Building Party. And I am, just off the top of my head thinking about like what it must have taken for the party to have gotten there, is the amount that they've mobilized on his behalf, the amount of support that they poured into him, and a lot of their strategic decisions. For example, the State Building Party cooperated with the DPP in the same way the NPP cooperated with the DPP 4 years ago. All of this kind of allowed someone like Chen Bo-wei to win.
So you think it's his personal charisma, or was something else going on there?
It definitely matters that he's very popular. So, he's someone who really kind of articulates a pro-Taiwan identity in a clear step farther than the DPP is comfortable. So, for example, Chen Bo-wei only spoke in Taiwanese for most of his media appearances.
Wow.
Which is a clear appeal to a more pro-Taiwan identity. A lot of his YouTube videos that he makes online are only done in Taiwanese. And the State Building Party itself is just more explicit pro-Taiwan independence than the DPP.
So it's amazing that he could win a very blue district.
It's totally unprecedented. I think of all the races, this is the one I'm probably going to talk about the most for the next long time.
You seem very touched.
So there were 5 candidates called the frontline candidates of young politicians that were kind of loosely affiliated, some within the DPP, some not. And these 5, I thought all 5 of them may lose because they were all running in really difficult to win districts. And the fact, and the one that everyone that I've spoken to was like, he's definitely that one we don't even need to talk about, was Chen Bo-wei.
Interesting.
And for him to be the one that's the first to be called to win.
That's interesting. For a fan of small parties who's been researching small parties during his time here on a Fulbright scholarship, I think this is probably very exciting for you.
I'm trying to contain myself.
We have another one here that we want to call. It looks like Freddie Lim has also won his race. Now, Freddie Lim, we featured him in that video that we showed you about the small parties. He was the one that is the heavy metal lead singer for the band Thonic, and he used to be with the NPP, the New Power Party, but then he split away, as you saw in that video and as you heard Lev talking about, to become an independent. And he ran as an independent and said that he supported President Tsai's re-election. So what do you make of Freddie Lim winning that race?
I completely thought Freddie was going to lose, and I am
Really?
almost as shook that Freddie won. And my reason being is if you look at Freddie's race 4 years ago, hype around the New Power Party was at an all-time high. And hype towards the DPP was at an all-time high. The anti-KMT sentiment was, no one wanted to vote for the KMT. And 4 years ago, Freddie barely won by a few thousand votes, and that's it.
But he's very well known.
Under really good conditions,
Right.
he barely won. And so 4 years later, when conditions are so different, I really just thought that Freddie was going to have just a really tough time because he doesn't even have the backing of the NPP anymore. Now he had the backing of the DPP. And I think the support for Tsai and the fact that Freddie and Tsai are so close probably helped a lot. Tsai kind of pulling a lot of votes for Freddie.
That campaign poster, too, where it showed Tsai wearing the little lit-up ears.
Yes.
And then behind her was two candidates. One was Freddie Lim.
Freddie and Lai Pingyu, who's another one of these 5 frontline candidates.
And they were both dressed up in kind of rocker outfits. It was definitely a campaign poster like I've never seen before. So that was
I mean, Freddie. So and the other challenge is so Freddie lives in Wanhua, which is a older district, meaning that the population
Taipei,
of Wanhua in Taipei has an older cohort of voters, which is tragic because if you go to a Thonic concert,
They're all young people,
They're all young
sure.
people. So this is kind of the sad irony, and this is what always kind of conflicted me about how to predict Freddie's race was if you go to a Freddie rally. Always
young people,
always
right.
well attended. Always well attended. Now the percentage of those people that can actually vote for Freddie who live in Wanhua, hard to say. But the fact that he won is just he ran a heck of a campaign.
So our social media guru Leslie Dow was telling me that Freddie Lim got close to 80,000 votes in his race. He's also saying Lai won. Which Lai?
Lai Pingyu. So she's
Okay.
another one of.
Yep.
So that means that 3 out of the 5 frontline candidates have won so far. It looks like Wu Yinong, Enoch Wu, who ran against Jiang Guanan, who is related to Chiang Kai-shek. Looks like he lost.
Really?
Or at least I don't know if it's called yet, but he's definitely
well,
behind
Let's see what's,
in
let's
the
not
polls.
call it yet.
Let's
No.
let's have a
Let's
look
not
at
call it yet.
our results and just have a look at what's going on there. So you can see on the top left-hand corner there, President Tsai with now 6.6 million votes. Han Kuo-yu from the KMT has about 4.4 million votes. So she has a good third over him. And then in a distant third, we have James Song from the PFP with 480,000 votes. Now, what else you're looking at there on the screen on the right-hand side, we have all the legislative races. And it looks like 2 winners there for the DPP in Taichung City. 3, actually. They're flashing through the different counties. This is Zhanghua County with 2 DPP candidates winning there. In Zhanghua County, we've got another KMT and a DPP candidate on top. 2 KMT candidates in Nantou County, and we've got a new screen there. Takes a minute to adjust.
Yeah, the last of the 5 frontline candidates, Hong Ziong, is still behind by about 1,000, which hasn't been called yet, but that's.
We'll never
That's
know
really
what's
tough.
going to happen, right? A lot of good news in that front. Lev, I have a question for you.
Yes.
What do you think of the future of these small parties in this legislature? What kind of impact they're going to have?
I'm very curious. I think how the new Power Party responds to what I think is definitely a very big victory for them is going to really set their direction for the next 4 years. At the same time, I think a party like the Taiwan State Building Party, having won their very first single-member district candidate, is really going to push them forward the next few years. I'm very much looking forward to the next midterm election because I think State Building Party is really going to come out in force, as will the NPP. So I think the future of third force competition is really going to be about the NPP versus the State Building Party in terms of kind of more pro-independence leaning parties. Now, of course, the TPP, like I said before, I'm very eager to see how they present themselves after getting into parliament. I think they're also really going to have to really define and conceptualize what their party is more than they have now. Otherwise, they're not going to really be able to keep rolling off of this momentum that they've started.
All right, we're going to throw up another slide now, number 16, the Enoch Wu and Jiang Wan'an race in Taipei City. We want to just show you those 2 candidates. They probably got more attention than any other single district race in Taiwan, and now they're calling it for Wayne Zhang on the left-hand side there from the KMT.
Because we know Enoch.
Sorry, I
You'd
not to
expect that.
emphasize.
Personal
I
against-
was hoping, that this would be a closer race, but
So we want to tell you a little bit about this. The reason why it was so popular, as you can tell, these are 2 handsome young men. So they captured national attention. Now, Wayne Zhang, he is the great-grandson of Chiang Kai-shek. What's interesting is his father, John Jiang, held the same seat in Taipei City 2 election cycles ago. and this is a very strong blue seat in Taipei City. So it was a very difficult race for Enoch Wu to challenge Wayne Zhang on that race in Taipei City's 3rd district.
So Enoch Wu is a new face to politics. He's 39 years old. He's single, graduate of Yale University. Yeah, a lot of girls care about that part.
And boys.
And yes, and he came back to Taiwan, giving up his U.S. citizenship, and he's been working as a consultant to the New Frontier Foundation. He also has his website, Thrive Taiwan, 壮阔 Taiwan, where he reports and analyzes defense issues for Taiwan. So it's been inspiring to see young people like him try to get into public service. What do you think of this race?
I think Enoch ran a really strong campaign. And even though he lost, I don't expect this will be the last we see of Enoch Wu.
Oh, definitely.
I fully expect that he will be around for a long time. At the same time, Jiang Wan'an, I think, is also an up-and-coming politician in the KMT, and not to talk about the next election too early, but I think he's definitely on the short list for potential mayor candidates for the KMT.
Actually,
That
it's
was mentioned
interesting.
before last time, even.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I also heard just comment a moment ago in the studio off air. Somebody was saying that it's possible that Enoch Wu could even get a position in the new cabinet. I mean, anything is possible with these
Sure,
young
anything's
popular
possible.
candidates. We also had a question that I kind of want to go back to too. Somebody was asking, like, who are some of the young up-and-coming stars of both the KMT and the DPP? I think in particular the question was referring to the KMT, which has been struggling to get a younger voter to appeal to a younger voter. What are your thoughts? Does anybody come to mind?
The only two young, and when I say young, I mean 40, which is not that 40 is not young, but that's kind of the
Talking about
youngest.
40 is very young.
Jason Shu and Jiang Wan'an are kind of the two of the youngest politicians that I think the KMT has to really offer right now.
And Jason Shu, just for the record, he was elected legislator on the party vote for the KMT. So he was actually on their party list last time around. He served for 1 term. He was very progressive on I think on new tech issues, things like ride sharing and whatnot. However, he was not placed on that party list for the KMT this time around, and there was a little bit of chatter about that.
The KMT party list. There's a lot to talk about with the KMT party list. It was one of the biggest scandals that really hurt the KMT the most. Now, I say it hurt the KMT the most, and I'm still seeing that the KMT is doing really well with its PR, proportional representation vote. So
You had seen a dip in the polls right after they announced their party list.
huge dip.
In a nutshell, can you explain very quickly what was it about the list that turned people off?
Every blatant pro-unification, meaning let's unify with China as soon as possible, politician was at the top of their list. And they still have one of those politicians on their list who got in this evening.
Wu
Suhai,
Suhai.
right? Number 4.
So he's in, and he is a former Taiwanese general who has gone to China to present to the CCP the best ways to defeat the Taiwanese military.
And now he's going to have
and now
access to, be privy to, I guess, military information as a
Correct.
lawmaker,
Correct.
which I think is a concern for the DPP.
I
for
would
the
say that's a
nation,
very
right?
big concern.
Yeah.
Credit must go to Enoch Wu, actually, because he's the one who started the campaign to try to raise attention to Wu Suhai and his kind of inevitable entrance into formal politics. A big part of Enoch's campaign was to try to get people to understand why you should not vote for the KMTs because of Wu Suhai being
Suhai.
on the party list.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with Lev Nachman, who is currently a Fulbright Scholar here in Taiwan, studying small parties. And also, he is a PhD candidate at UC Irvine. Lev, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for shedding light on these small parties.
Thank you so much for having me. I was here at the last midterm, and I'm thrilled to be back for this election. Thank
All
you
right,
so
maybe
much.
we'll have you in 4
Next
years.
time.
Oh, no, 2 years.
I would be so lucky. Thank you.
Thanks again, Lev.
Thanks so much, Lev.
So if you're just joining us, this is Taiwan Insider Decision 2020. We are bringing you live, rolling coverage of the election results here in Taiwan. A total of 3 hours commercial free. That's right. We've been here with you for 2 of them. We're coming up on the 8 o'clock hour. I'm Andrew Ryan.
I'm Natalie So, and actually, Taiwan Insider is a weekly news magazine. We're usually about 20 to 25 minutes pre-recorded. We have a lot of interesting news and features, quizzes, all kinds of fun things we do in Taiwan Insider, recapping news of the week. So that's every Thursday on Facebook and YouTube. You can check us out then.
That's right, and be sure to like us. You can also share this live feed with your friends and family, anybody who's interested in learning about the elections here in Taiwan in English. And of course, this live show, this is something that's new for us.
Yes, it is.
We've
And being
only-
here like for 2 hours is a long time.
It is. But we're doing good. I'm feeling good. How are you
Yeah,
doing,
this is
Natalie?
fun. This is exciting. We get to see all the legislative and presidential votes come in as they come in. And, you know, Taiwan has been obsessed with elections for a very long time. And sometimes people are a little bit too obsessed. So we have this thing called election syndrome. So let's take a look at what that is. We have a video here about that.
Has the state of politics got you sick? You're not alone. In Taiwan, a bruising campaign season is underway in the final weeks before the 2020 election, and it is literally making people here unwell. Mental health professionals say this is something that happens around election time here. They say that for some people, especially those most tuned into politics, all of this pressure takes a toll. The result is what they call election syndrome. The syndrome manifests itself in different ways. Some lose sleep, feel anxiety, or feel they can't eat. Patients may even become delusional. Dr. Yang Tongcai tells of one patient who came to believe they had magical powers that could guarantee victory for their preferred candidate. However, they also became convinced that they were being followed by someone from the opposing candidate's campaign. While the symptoms vary, the reach of election syndrome stretches evenly across party lines. Based on past experience, psychiatrists expect to see a 20% jump in the number of people of all political stripes seeking help in the month surrounding Election Day. They advise those feeling stressed out to limit media consumption. Dr. Yang also advises exercise and a healthy acceptance that in elections there are wins and there are losses.
You're watching Taiwan Insider Decision 2020, and we are bringing you live coverage of the presidential and legislative elections right here from our studios in Taipei. I am Natalie So.
And I'm Andrew Ryan, and we are going to go straight to our results and have a look at what is happening with the vote count right now. So we're going to put that up on the screen for you. Up in the top left-hand corner, we have President Tsai Ing-wen, the incumbent, who is leading the race with about 7 million votes, to Han Kuo-yu from the KMT. So he has about 4.7 million votes, so it's a considerable lead, way out in front there with 7 million votes. And then in a distant third place, we have James Song with the PFP, about 520,000 votes. And we just did a little bit of math there for you to figure out what percentage of the total eligible voters have been counted. So the total number of eligible voters is about 19 million people here in Taiwan. So a little bit of math shows us that about 61%, if everyone voted, 61% of the vote would have been counted by this point.
So we're nearing the end, I think, because last election there were 66% of the people voted. We don't know what the turnout was this year yet, but it looks like a pretty strong trend here.
That's right. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking with Karis Templeman, who is a political scientist at Stanford University and is heading the Taiwan Democracy and Security Project there. But first, we want to toss to our social media guru, Leslie Thao, who's joining us now in the studio. How's it going, Leslie?
I got to be honest, you guys. This is probably the most calm I've been all night. I mean, it's a doozy, man. Like trying to keep track of the voting and then keep track of the elections, keep track of what people are saying, and people are saying so many things on our Facebook feed.
Any interesting comments?
We have many comments. Let's start off with one. Dave Truba says, "What do the hosts think of Tsai and the DPP's outreach and social media efforts? They seem very effective to me." Dave Truba from YouTube.
Actually, I think we should toss that right back to you, Leslie, because
That's
you've done
right.
a number of segments on #Taiwan about all of the different ways that Tsai and her team have appeared on social media. I recall people, some pictures of her dressed in superhero wear.
Yeah.
and also
Cosplay?
fan art.
Yeah. So she's definitely appealing to her younger voter base, and that was very evident. It was a big deal when President Tsai first set up an Instagram, when she first got a YouTube channel, and then not only that, but she also worked with very well-known internet personalities, Aure, the artist, and then there's also YouTubers that also collaborate with her, and some YouTubers, if you remember that episode we did on Potter King.
Yes.
right.
How could you forget he was flirting with her? I mean, that was
and not a
that
lot
was
of
fun
people
to
get to
see.
do that, and I think she was able to kind of embrace that side of pop culture, and that was a really, really, really effective strategy in getting young people. You know, young people might not be looking at a TV or something, but they're definitely on their phones, they're definitely on Instagram, on Facebook, and things like that.
Yeah.
So that campaign is by far one of the best that I've seen.
What other questions are coming in at this hour from people leaving messages on Facebook and YouTube?
All right,
for us?
Jonathan Lapp says, I'm so happy to get coverage in English. I want to highlight that, because you guys have been doing a great job. I want to ask the hosts, do you think Tsai, if reelected, can help achieve Hong Kong independence?
Wow,
Oh,
that's
wow.
a big ask.
I don't think that's possible. That's not in her realm. And she actually has always said she doesn't want to get involved, although she does support them, I guess, in spirit, the pursuit of democracy.
I mean, I think there are a lot of things that she could be doing to support them that she's chosen not to. So I think for example, talking about people seeking asylum in Taiwan, people from Hong Kong, she's definitely drawn the line there and hasn't proceeded with that. So I think it's a big jump from where Tsai is right now to, I mean, Hong Kong independent. I haven't even considered it. That's how far out of the realm of possibility I think that is at this point.
We got a lot more comments. Mei Lin says, haha, 1 million Leslie is so cute. And there is nothing cute about a 1
Dreaming.
million
Nothing cute about
view
dreaming.
count on our stream. I think it's very realistic, very doable. We have very knowledgeable speakers.
I'm going to go back and check out our Facebook page and just make sure somebody really made that comment. You didn't
can-
just write it yourself.
It's there. It's there.
Okay.
Go ahead. Next, Darius Vitt says, great coverage. Are the results from Kaohsiung better or worse than expected for Han? Is there a strong regional divide in this election?
Good question. We'll keep an eye on the reports coming in.
Yes, it's hard to follow. We have so many things flashing on our results screen. We will jump back to that in just a moment. And actually, can you monitor that for us and just leave us a little message
Sure.
and let us know?
Sure. Even more, Randy Finch, he says, the transparency of the count at my local polling place in New Taipei was deeply inspiring. Now that I'm at my computer, I'm thrilled that you're offering such a professional broadcast. Great work.
Wow, thank
That's
you.
for you guys.
And we're actually, in just a moment, we're going to have somebody who's come straight here from the Central Election Commission who's going to talk a little bit about how this vote is playing out, the vote count, a little bit about some of the rules and the way things work here in Taiwan. So we'll have more on that for you as well.
Even more, Kevin Kine says, can you guys talk about the referendum to lower the voting age?
It's not a referendum this time around. People are definitely talking about lowering the voting age. Right now, the age to vote in Taiwan is 20 years of age. There's been people pushing for that to be moved down to 18, which is actually on par with most of the world. 20 is a little bit higher than the kind of the global average voting age. This is, I think, being pushed more by the DPP than by the KMT because their voters, their electorate tends to skew a little bit younger, so it would benefit them a little bit more. But that's not on the ballot. That is not an official referendum at this point.
Mike Waterford, I just want to, he says, what a very interesting discussion this last hour. I've gained knowledge that I otherwise would never had the opportunity to learn. Thanks a lot. And there's another hour next, so,
Yes,
That's
one more
right.
hour to
And we
go.
have an expert with us from Stanford University, Carlos Templeman.
Yes.
And just one last question, which I think is really interesting because you guys got at the end of your interview with Lev, is will Enoch get a position in the DPP cabinet?
Interesting. Yeah, we're wondering that. Maybe our next guest will have a comment on that. It's really hard to say at this point. Certainly, his campaign will come out in the next probably hour or so and speak publicly. We'll see maybe from his words whether he has any understanding of what's going to happen
But
next.
he's very popular. I'm sure they're going to find something good for him to do.
And that's about all I have for now. But like I said to all the viewers who are watching us now, like, share, comment on our Facebook stream if you enjoy what we're doing. And if you want to talk with me while these guys are talking, perfectly fine. I'm there chatting the entire time, so go ahead.
Okay, where can you find us if you're not already watching? Of course, you are watching, so you know we're on Taiwan Insider's Facebook page. Where else can you find us?
You can also find us on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah. And under RTI English, you go to the playlist. We're all there.
Excellent. Also go to english.rti.org.tw for more information, news, videos, all about the elections here in Taiwan. Well, thank you so much, Leslie.
Absolutely.
We're going to be checking in with you again at the end of the 8 o'clock hour.
I'll have the good stuff for you.
All right. Thanks, Leslie. If you're just joining us, this is Taiwan Insider Decision 2020. We are bringing you a live coverage of the election results here in Taiwan. And we're going to toss back to our results screen to just give you an idea of where we are at this moment in the vote count. So let's toss that screen up.
So on the left, we have the Central Election Commission official tally, and Tsai Ing-wen has 7.3 million votes already. And Han Kuo-yu of the Kuomintang has 4.89 million, whereas James Song has 530,000 votes. And straight from the Central Election Commission is our next guest. He is the manager of the Taiwan Democracy and Security Project at Stanford University, Carlos Templeman. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you actually physically came straight here from the Central Election Commission, is that
I did,
correct?
yeah. I hopped on the Jaeyun and booked it over here.
The MRT?
So what was it like over there? What was the scene?
To be very frank with you, it's kind of boring. It's about, there are no party officials there. It's probably the last place you want to be watching the count come in because it's very slow there. So they show all of the results on a giant screen, and the results have to be confirmed before they're put up on the screen. So it's way behind what you're showing here.
Now, can you maybe give us an idea of what we're looking at? Because on the left-hand side of our results screen, let's flash that up again. On the left-hand side, we have the official results from the Central Election Commission. And then on the right-hand side at the top there, we have the source it says is the KMT. And I know that a lot of people are monitoring this. Some are journalists. Some of them are political parties. But are these people that are actually at the polling stations who are watching the results at the polling stations being announced and therefore getting the numbers out earlier than the Central Election Commission? What's happening there?
Yeah, so according to, as far as I understand, each polling place calls in the numbers, but then they also have to electronically transmit them. And the numbers are actually physically posted outside of the polling place as well. And so anyone who's observing the vote count can call in the numbers as soon as they're finalized, which can happen anywhere from an hour to 2 hours after the polls close. And so I'm frankly not actually sure what the sources of either of these totals are. What I can tell you is that what they show on the big official screen at the Central Election Commission is a much lower number on all counts. Yes,
really?
Much lower.
That's interesting.
Yeah, at least it was 40 minutes ago.
So maybe this is inaccurate. Maybe they're jumping the gun here.
Or maybe they just had a massive influx of votes all of a sudden.
I think that the number on the left-hand side there, the Central Election Commission numbers have definitely jumped by a couple million, maybe even in the last 40 minutes or to an hour.
Okay, well,
yeah,
do they
they're
have
usually way behind.
Do they have the party list vote up there somewhere?
Party list vote, we don't have that on the screen. We are slowly getting the party list vote in, just to give our viewers at home an idea of where we were at the last time. And I know that Leslie Dow is also checking in on the party vote for us. But we had the KMT at 33%, the DPP at 35%, the TPP at 10%, and the NPP at 7%. Again, they need to get 5%. There's a 5% threshold in order to get one seat, and you actually get two right off the bat.
That's correct, right.
So Carlos, what do you think of the results so far?
Well, let me first say it's about what I would have expected, about what the polls showed. So there's no big surprises here, and I think given the kind of polling misses we've had across democracies the last couple of years, that's reassuring. You know, polls overall do tell us something new about the electoral environment we're in, and we've learned something, I think, about the polling industry in Taiwan, and that is still pretty good.
Actually, I think we can show up some of the polls. If we can maybe show the slide for the polls, I believe it's slide number 3. So you can see the final showing for the 3 candidates, not that one. Maybe slide 4, 4 or 5 polls. Looking for the polls to show how the 3 main candidates were faring. Now, of course, here in Taiwan, we have a blackout on opinion polls, which is the final 10 days before the elections. Maybe you can tell us, why do we have this kind of blackout? And we'll get that slide up in a moment.
Right. So the blackout has been around a while. It's there in part to prevent the release of misleading or mobilizing polls that might skew the elections in some way, mobilize certain groups, demobilize other groups. The reason that blackout is so short is that earlier on in the election cycle, if an inaccurate poll is released, it might have a short-term impact, but it usually disappears as new polls are released. And so it's to prevent a kind of last-minute poll that shocks people and changes their planned voting behavior.
Now, you actually, during your time here in Taiwan as an observer, you also got the opportunity to go to a number of rallies, political rallies, and you've observed the election from a bunch of different perspectives. Can you tell me some of the things that you've seen during your time this time?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to join a group that went to both the Han rally on Thursday night and the Tsai rally, both on Kadagalan Boulevard, on Friday night. And the size of the rallies was, of course, an issue. It was a question about that. And
in terms of like how accurate the size
yeah,
projections
how
were?
accurate. And when you've got one rally on Thursday and one on Friday, it's dueling rallies, right? And you want your rally to be bigger than the other guys. So
Well, people were saying about 1 million for Han, right?
I don't believe that, simply
Okay.
because that entire space wouldn't fit half that. So yeah, so that's
Just yeah, I'm curious because his fans were saying that, and
Yeah, I mean-
they seemed so enthusiastic. But here we look at the polls.
yeah.
he's
Well,
way
and
behind.
the broader point here is that rally size is a terrible indicator of who's going to win, right? The way I'd categorize this election, I think, is Han as a candidate whose support is very deep but also very narrow, and Tsai Ing-wen as a candidate whose support is quite broad but also not as deep generally. And so if you have fewer core fans showing up to your rallies, that may indicate that you've got some real hardcore supporters, but it doesn't mean that you're appealing to the swing voters who decide elections. And so I actually try not to look at rally size at all when I'm thinking about how to project an election.
So what do you look when you're thinking about projecting the election?
Well, first and foremost, I look at polls, and especially polling averages, and especially an average that weights polling companies that do a good job over polling companies that don't release their methodology or otherwise have strong house effects and so forth. So there's in this election cycle in particular, there were a lot of polling companies that seemed to pop up overnight or release very dubious results, or a poll was mentioned but not released, and only one part of the result was out there.
And skewing towards one candidate over another, or like pretty broad across?
I don't think it's unique to one side or the other. I think there's motives in both camps to do this kind of attempt to manipulate their results in a way that favors their own campaign. And this is not exclusive to Taiwan, of course. We see this in the U.S. frequently as well. So
absolutely.
So it looks like Taiwan has pretty much won the race. I'm curious what you think is going to happen in her second term. How do you think she's going to deal with China, or China's going to deal with her? That's kind of the big question.
Yeah,
right?
it is. It's a really big question. I think it's the question that folks in the United States are most concerned about. And I'm sure there are people in her brain trust, her administration, who have been thinking about that question a lot over the last couple of months. And the ball is really in Beijing's court. There's a couple ways to interpret this election from Beijing, but what you cannot interpret it as is a sign that their current strategy towards Taiwan is working. You know, they tried to undercut Tsai Ing-wen almost from her first day in office. They have poached a bunch of diplomatic allies. They put a lot of pressure on her administration in the international sphere, and all of that has resulted in a share of the vote in 2020 that is almost exactly the same as what she got in 2016. So it's a repeat.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So nothing's changed in terms of
so if this is your
support.
strategy, then so one way to interpret this in Beijing is that their strategy is just fundamentally failing, and they may need to take a pause, step back, and fundamentally reassess. And there is a precedent for that in Beijing's Taiwan policy. They did something like that in 2005 after Chen Shui-bian narrowly won re-election.
His second term, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when we're looking at sort of like the path forward, I mean, do you think there'll be a shift in Tsai's kind of what her way she's dealing with China?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to think about this. One is she doesn't have to run for re-election anymore. I'm sure that's part of it's going to be part of her own private celebration tonight. She doesn't particularly seem to enjoy being out there campaigning. It's kind of it's a chore she has to do, and she can be coaxed to smile at crowds and so forth. But she's really much more of a kind of internal party politician than she is a charismatic speaker, or someone like Su Zhenchang, who just clearly has this magnetism on stage where he just
That's
owns
her
the
premier,
place.
yeah.
Your current premier, yes, right. I think she can now put the election behind her and think about policy issues, and so she may have some more flexibility in her her cross-strait policy over the next 4 years that she hasn't had over the last couple.
Does she have any more tools in her toolbox in terms of dealing with China?
So Beijing wants her to do certain things. One was to pledge to support the 1992 consensus. For obvious political reasons, that was almost impossible for her.
And that's where both sides agree
Yes,
that
right.
there
One
being
China
one
with a
China
different
with different
interpretation.
interpretations of what one China is.
right.
Yeah.
And this is such a I've just opened up a can of worms. So when we talk about this, the 92 consensus, every party seems to have its own definition of it. But for the DPP, it's a non-starter. If Tsai Ing-wen did accept the 92 consensus and use those exact words, she would alienate a huge part of her party immediately. And so she politically is just not in a position to do that, and wasn't in 2016. Below that, though, there are some interesting kind of long-term desires from Beijing to see movement within the DPP towards a more moderate cross-strait position where they don't fundamentally endorse Taiwanese independence. They're not working towards that. They're supporting the status quo, or even making other moves. The obvious one is there's a plank in the DPP party charter that pledges them to support independence, to work towards independence one day. And that's been partially superseded by subsequent statements, but Beijing would like to see that plank go from the DPP. And so Tsai Ing-wen might be in a position to at least freeze it, if not abolish it, in a second term.
So do you think that Beijing will change their strategy and be more friendly towards Tsai?
Well,
Or be more
that would
less
be,
friendly?
from my perspective, that would be Beijing's smart move, because obviously the DPP is not going away anytime soon. It's who they're going to have to deal with for the next 4 years, and maybe beyond that. But we haven't seen a whole lot of flexibility or creative thinking from Xi Jinping's China these days. And so what I worry about is that they'll pursue they'll basically double down on what they've done in the last 4 years. So it's a kind of beatings continue until the morale improves strategy. So they'll continue to poach diplomatic allies. They'll continue to pressure the administration, shrink economic space. There's some actual economic concerns coming up. ECFA, for instance, is set to potentially expire at the end of this year, September of this year.
ECFA, Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement?
Yeah, so this was an agreement pushed forward by the Ma administration, signed in 2010, that laid a framework for cross-strait economic negotiations. And it has a 10-year renewal date on it.
It's
Oh,
so
it's been 10
interesting.
years already. I can't believe
I
it.
know, right? It's hard to believe it.
I was thinking, did we do that? That
Didn't we
happened?
just do that?
I know.
I'm confused. Okay. So that, and then this, just to remind people too, this is sort of connected to what happened with the sunshine. The
Sunflower
sunflower
movement.
movement, because this is a sort of kind of what people were pushing back against, the type of thing people were pushing back against
Right.
back in 2014, which led them, the students to take
Right.
over the legislative yuan. I want to just go to our results again here for just a moment. Now, I want to say we are expecting President
there's
Tsai
Enoch Wu.
to speak in just a moment. But for now, we're looking at Enoch Wu. That's the race that we mentioned, Taipei's district number 3.
Has that been called?
That has been called. He has actually lost the race to his
Still has
opponent.
a smile on his face, though.
Still has a smile on his face. But I think he's probably very emotional at this point, probably having a difficult time speaking, thanking his supporters for what's happening there. Let's look at the presidential tally right now. We have President Tsai from the DPP, the incumbent, ahead with 7.7, just jumped 7.7 million votes to the second place there for the KMT. That's Han Kuo-yu with 5.1 million votes. Distant third place, just breaking 500,000, is James Song from the PFP. And now, Karis, just looking at these results, is this kind of in line with what you were expecting, or do you see a surprise in any of the results that we're looking at today?
Yeah. So in the presidential race, Tsai's number is about where I would expect it. She's coming in somewhere between 56 and 58% of the vote, and I had thought anywhere from 55 to 60%. So it's right in the middle of that range. Han, if there's a surprise here, it's that Han actually consolidated most of the pan-blue vote behind him, and Song's efforts to poach or bleed some of the support away from the KMT really have not done very well. Song was at what I think is the lower range of where he could have been. And that's interesting in part because by the end, he had Terry Go running campaign ads for his own PFP candidates, and Terry Go's sort of charisma or whatever political value he could have brought.
Again, this is
Yeah.
Foxconn chairman,
Sorry. Yeah.
former Foxconn chairman, the guy who makes your iPhone.
Right.
Yeah.
Who ran and lost in the KMT primary and then refused to endorse Han Kuo-yu. So if there's a message here or something to infer from this, it's that Terry Guo might not be quite as influential among Pan
that's
Blues
interesting.
as you might expect. And so the efforts to kind of portray him as a strong candidate in 2024, I think, need to take that into account.
Do you think that's because party alignment is really strong? So if you identify as Pan Blue, then you're going to vote KMT, and the chances of switching to the PFP or another party are pretty slim?
Yeah, generally Taiwan, comparatively speaking, Taiwan has a very strongly institutionalized political system with high partisanship, especially for a young democracy. It's very different from Korea or the democracies of Southeast Asia. So this is about what we would expect with a strong party system with high institutionalization. So this is a sign, I think, that the KMT still continues to draw. It has a lot of partisans out there. There's a lot of core blue supporters who, unless the KMT actively screws up, they're going to vote KMT.
That's true. Well, it's interesting to compare these figures to the last election 4 years ago. Tsai Ing-wen in the last election got 6.9 million votes, so she's already way past that.
Okay, that's really interesting. So turnout is way up in this election. then,
Yeah,
I
and
would say.
Eric Chu got 3.8 million, so Han Kuo-yu's got much more than he did.
So actually, both of them have blasted through the totals for the last election. So we're looking at a really high turnout rate. If you compare that to some of the previous years, for 2000, of course, the population has grown a little bit since then, but we had 4.9 million for Chen Shui-bian, who won, and to James Song that year came in second with 4.6 million. But then they also split the vote with Lian Zhan as well. So very interesting. Turnout has jumped. Why do you think turnout has gone up this year?
Turnout in 2016 was actually at a record low for a presidential election. If I remember correctly, it was about 66%.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
And prior to that, it had always been in the 70s. And in 2000, it was an astonishing 80%. So we're kind of back up towards a more, both camps have really mobilized most of their core supporters. And so I would expect turnout to be higher. I'm curious what the final number will be. If we're definitely above 70, I would guess, and we might be approaching 75.
So some really strong feelings among the electorate this campaign season. Why do you think people are viewing this election slightly differently from previous elections? Do you feel that? Do you think that it feels different from previous elections here
Is
in
it
Taiwan?
more important? I mean, every election brands itself as the most important one.
Yeah.
but
This
time it
is
always
it really
is,
the
right?
most important one?
Is there an
Yes.
urgency to this election?
Well, I think what's different, I mean, Taiwanese elections are always very emotional. There's a lot of appeals to people to save democracy or save Taiwan from war and so forth. And there's very extreme language. And that was certainly present here as well. What's different to me is the greater amount of kind of rumor mongering, disinformation, and the kind of second order concerns about those sort of issues. That was less visible in 2016 and in previous elections. Certainly, rumors have always been a part of Taiwanese politics, but I was astounded, actually, in talking to some Pan Blue supporters that they were absolutely convinced that Han was going to win, or that, like, with 80% probability. And that to my mind, was different than in previous elections.
What I thought was interesting too is I had a lot of people. I heard from both sides as well, but I heard a lot of people like hardcore DPP supporters that were very, very nervous in the run-up.
Nervous.
Also, thinking that Han could pull off a victory.
Right.
Why is that? Is it because of the candidate himself? And kind of like
That he
people
surprises people.
saying, yeah, he surprises people, but also people talk about qi shi. So it's like you're sort of like that force
passion
that
of his
brings you
supporters.
into office.
Well, I think he did pull off a surprise in 2018. I think that's the single most important factor.
By
right?
becoming mayor of Kaohsiung, which was a very deep green city, had been ruled by a DPP mayor for 20 years.
Correct, right.
Yeah.
So that victory, I didn't think was possible. I think most observers wrote him off. And so his ability to catch fire and win that election really freaked a lot of people in the Green camp
Right.
out.
You never know, right?
But the polls did show a close race there. And so he performed at the top end of what the polls were showing, but that was going to be a close race. And so it's not an entirely out of the left field surprise that he won. The polls here did not show a close race.
We can show that the polls. We have a slide for the opinion polls about the presidential election, slide number 5. Maybe we can put that up on the screen. I think we have that now.
Yeah.
This is from the News Lens, which is basically an aggregator, which showed Han actually, if you go back to May of 2019, he was in the lead. Looked like he was, maybe even had this in the bag. And then slowly but surely, President Tsai, she kind of gained a lead, pulled ahead by, you can see there in August of 2019, she kind of crossed paths with him. It doesn't look like there's any big incident which made a change in this. It looks like a gradual thing over time. Is that your understanding of what happened?
That's my understanding. Remember that is not one particular polling company. That's an average of every poll we've got out there. And so even if you have problems with a particular polling company, the average should be pretty accurate, and it does paint a very stark picture. There's a steady decline in Han's numbers and a steady rise in Tsai Ing-wen's. And I would note they at the end there, they do end up, except for Song Chu-yu, Song underperformed those polls.
That's right.
So what that suggests to me is that they ended up about where the polls had them, except Han was able to pull some Pan Blue supporters back to him from Song.
I want to toss back to our election results just now. We can see that Taipei Mayor Ko Wen-je is now speaking to the public. There's a headline under him that says that the Taiwan People's Party is their first shot at the elections, the first whistle blow, and then they got 1 million votes in the party vote.
That's pretty good.
Now, just to remind you, the party vote is basically you vote in a separate ballot for a party, and then the percentage of votes in the party vote then goes to different parties allotting seats. There's a total of 34 out of 113 seats in the legislature are party vote seats. So for them to get 1 million votes in the party vote, what do you make of that?
So what is the percentage we're looking at? 11 point.
We've
wow,
got 11.1% for the TPP. Just by comparison, in first place with the largest percentage is the DPP with 34, KMT with 33, then down to the TPP. Strong showing for a third party, 11%. And then the NPP looks like they're also going to break their way into the party vote there with 7.7%.
Yeah, so there are several surprising things about those four parties. First off, since Ke is on the screen, Mayor Ke,
Yeah.
it's impressive to create a new party and to perform that well in your first election.
Right, and he's not even a candidate.
He's not even a candidate on the list. So that suggests he's got some serious personal charisma. He's able to draw a lot of voters to him and to his party. His party wasn't really ideological at all by choice. They were being very deliberate about that strategy. And so for them to draw almost was looking close to 12%. That's at the high end of the range that I thought they would be in. The second thing that's interesting there is the New Power Party actually survived. They've made it back into the legislature, and that was definitely not obvious to me a month ago. I thought they would struggle to crest 5%, and they're actually outperforming the party list vote that they got in 2016. So
wow.
That's I'm actually probably more surprised by that than anything else on that party list outcome.
It'll be really interesting to see like what percent all the different parties get of this legislature. Now, the last time in 2016, the third most seats was held by the NPP. They got, I think it was 5 seats that they got.
Yeah.
That includes not just party vote seats, but also seats in the direct election, in the district representative portion of the legislative seats. So the way it's looking now, again, we're going to have to look at the different constituencies and to see whether or not the NPP and the TPP got seats there as well. But just by looking at the party vote, it looks like the TPP could be the third largest party in Taiwan's legislature. What do you make of their role as the third largest party? And do you think that they'll be sort of like a kingmaker? Will one party have to form a coalition with them?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and it's certainly what Mayor Ke was striving for. If you hold the balance of power in the legislature, you can extract a lot of concessions, and so. The question is actually less to do with the TPP and more to do with the DPP and how they finish over the night. One other striking thing to me is that the DPP is down quite a few percent from where they were in 2016 on the party list. And so even though Tsai Ing-wen is basically repeating her performance from that year, the party list has been quite a bit less attractive to voters than it was in 2016. I believe they got about 44%, and so they're down below 36%. That means they're going to lose probably 4, maybe 5 PR seats. And so they'll still, I think, have a majority, but if they don't, then Mayor Ke's party is playing the kingmaker role, and the DPP will need either their votes or should Ai Li-liang, the New Power Party's votes, to elect a speaker.
But more likely to get NPP votes than TPP votes.
Certainly the DPP, I think, would start with the NPP. The TPP is interesting because they're really trying to straddle the green and blue divide in Taiwan. So the DPP is to their left, the KMT is to their right, and they're trying not to talk about the China issue at all.
It's interesting. They chose the perfect color to straddle the two,
I think that was very deliberate.
Yeah. Right? Very interesting. I'm curious to know also what your thoughts are about kind of the role the party vote plays. Because I think my understanding, and I could be totally wrong on this, my original understanding is that the party vote would actually benefit small parties. But I've actually written a little bit about read a little bit about what you said about this, and you've said that actually there's not a problem with supply of small parties because there's a lot of small parties, but there may not be a demand for that many parties. Right. So in the end, as we're seeing here, there may only be a handful of parties in the legislature. It's not like we're going to have 10 different parties with legislators.
Yeah.
Well, so what are your thoughts on the role of the party vote? Is it to get more parties?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly designed to give small parties an opportunity to win representation in the legislature. A 5% threshold comparatively is not a very high threshold. So there should be, you don't have to be one of the two major parties to be competitive on the party list. And so I still think it's more of a demand problem than a supply problem. There are voters out there who there are lots of voters out there who still are willing to support the two major parties on the party list, and you can imagine there's no real electoral punishment for defecting from the DPP on the party list. If you vote for the DPP in the district vote, you're not throwing your vote away on the party list if you vote for New Power Party or TPP or the PFP and so forth. And so
unless they don't get the 5%.
Well, yeah, and so there is a bit of a strategic coordination problem if there are many small parties out there competing for the same activity, the same list.
We're actually now, I'm sorry to cut you off, we're just getting a speech from the second place candidate, Han Kuo-yu. Let's go straight to the election results. Can we show that screen? And we're going to try to bring you a translation of his concession speech as soon as we can give that to you. So let's have a listen to what Han Kuo-yu, the KMT candidate, is saying. I haven't worked hard enough, and I've not lived up to people's expectation of me. I want to ask everybody, I want to say to everybody here, to all the people of the Republic of China, no matter when you get up from bed in the morning, we have to come together. People from all walks of life. The people who love Taiwan the most are we, the Taiwanese, and we must continue to work hard. We have to be strong. And I want to ask President Tsai, for the 4 coming years of her administration, I want you to work for the betterment of the people of Taiwan. In addition to congratulating her, I want to say that everybody wants to lead a good life, and we look forward to the future and a better Taiwan, a more beautiful Taiwan. My friends, my brothers and sisters, let's work together starting on Monday when we go back to work. We're heading towards Chinese New Year, and we have many things that we need to do here in Kaohsiung as mayor, and I will continue to shoulder the responsibility. I want to thank everybody who loves me. Let's work together for Taiwan and for the Republic of China. Best wishes, and thank you very much. So that is the concession speech from the Kaohsiung Mayor Han Kuo-yu, who rode on a blue wave to election in Kaohsiung as mayor, came out of the blue. Someone would call it a populist wave to become the first KMT mayor of Kaohsiung in 20 years, but not quite making it to the presidency. As you can see there, the final results, at least the tally that we have right now, is 5.3 million votes for Han Kuo-yu to 7.9 million votes for Tsai Ing-wen, the incumbent president. A decisive victory for Tsai. Very emotional scene there that we see there with Han Kuo-yu giving his concession speech after a hard-fought campaign, but just not quite pulling it out to win this election.
We actually have an interesting question from one of our viewers, Daniel Kirkwood, who said, so what is next for the KMT? Will they need to distance themselves from PRC China to remain electorally relevant? What do you think, Carlos?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question for the KMT, is how they recover from this defeat and what their China policy is going to look like going forward. It obviously wasn't good enough to win this election, and it's given their reliance on older voters and their trouble with young voters, that challenge is just going to get much worse over the next couple of election cycles. And so they really need to think long and hard about how to reform their policy and their own internal organization as well.
So it's not just about China policy, it's also about how they're going to get younger voters, how are they going to groom the next generation. Do you have your eyes on anybody from the KMT that could potentially help bring the party into the 2020s?
Well, it's easy to forget tonight that the KMT actually had a smashing victory in 2018, and most of the local county and city executives are KMT members. And so that's where the real talent of the next generation of the party lies, and that's where I would expect to find the next most formidable national party leader or candidate. So Hou You-yi in New Taipei is an obvious possibility. Liu Xiuyan as the mayor of Taichung City is another one. So those two they lead major municipalities in Taiwan. They're both local politicians first and foremost. They haven't gotten involved in too many intra-party fights or ideological battles, and so that tends to make a better profile for a formidable national run.
And I'm curious more on the bigger scale. The U.S. has been very supportive of President Tsai, and do you see that continuing, especially if China gives Tsai even more pressure in the second term? Do you think that, what kind of ways will the U.S. support Taiwan?
Yeah, I think there won't be any change at all from the U.S. perspective. They know and like Tsai Ing-wen. She's been a responsible steward of cross-strait relations from the U.S. perspective and of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. They like what she's tried to do on her defense policies, reform of the military, and her efforts to support U.S. U.S. policy in the free and open Indo-Pacific. And so I think the U.S. is probably satisfied that Tsai Ing-wen has won. There's no need to change policy.
I want to just bring you some more news that we're getting here now. It looks like the KMT, the Kuomintang, is going to hold a press conference at about 9 p.m. Right now it's 8:53 p.m. here in Taiwan. Also, Wu Duanyi, the chairman of the KMT, is expected to resign. Hao Longbing, who is, I believe, an honorary chairman and former mayor of Taipei City, has already resigned via Facebook. And Tsai, who originally we thought we were going to hear from her in a press conference about 8:30. It looks like she's going to speak to the nation at 9:30 p.m. Now, we were originally scheduled to only go to 9 p.m. We are going to postpone and continue bringing you live coverage of the election results as they unfold here in Taiwan on a very momentous and very exciting day here, Election Day. And if you've just joined us, I just want to remind you that you're listening to Taiwan Insider Decision 2020. I've been Andrew Ryan.
I am Natalie So. We're actually here every Thursday with news and features with our weekly news magazine show. It's usually about 20 minutes where we cover a lot of interesting things that happen in Taiwan. But today we're covering the elections live, and we have with us a very special guest, Carlos Templeman from Stanford University. He heads the Taiwan Democracy and Security Project there. So I know that you're also a defense expert.
And security expert.
Security expert, right?
Yeah. I play one on television. Expert may be too strong, but I've done some research on Taiwan's defense issues.
Yeah. So I am curious because, the biggest issue or fear, anxiety that people have here in Taiwan is, would there ever be a conflict with China? I mean, how possible do you think that is?
Does her reelection kind of elevate the security concern, or does it kind of make things come down?
Well, it certainly doesn't decrease it. Let's put it that way. I mean, this is a maintaining election. The same person is going to be in power for the next 4 years who we had the last 4, and so the same threats and opportunities will be present over this period. I do think there's a worry in the United States that if Beijing doubles down and continues the pressure campaign, that has included ramped up military exercises around Taiwan's territorial airspace and waters. And if Beijing views that as a viable way to increase pressure on the Tsai administration, the likelihood of some kind of accidental confrontation that results in a crash or some kind of other other incident could spiral out of control. And so I don't think that's particularly likely. It hasn't been. I don't think it will in the future. But if there's a desire by Beijing to really ramp up military intimidation, then that kind of spark might become more likely.
We're going to cut away to our results screen again. It looks like we have the KMT, the chairman, Wu Dunyi, who is now speaking. It looks like he is definitely, it's confirmed that he is resigning as chairman of the KMT. He's standing there, sitting there, about ready to make a speech, surrounded by other officials from the Kuomintang. We're just going to look at our results once again here now. It looks like the votes are continuing to tally up there. On the left-hand side, we have the Central Election Commission's official tally. Tsai Ing-wen, the incumbent president, has broke 8 million. I need somebody to maybe do the math for me on that and decide whether or not what kind of a percentage that is. In second place, we have the Kuomintang's Han Kuo-yu with nearly 5.4 million votes. In a distant third place, we have James Song with about 594,000 votes, only just breaking a half million there. And of course, we have all of our other legislative votes slowly coming in. And you can see that in different places across Taiwan, they're now calling a lot of those races.
Actually, at 9 o'clock, we're going to hear from our president, Tsai Ing-wen, and our newly reelected president, Tsai Ing-wen. So we'll be giving you her acceptance speech. So we'll hear what she has to say. But, Karis, do you expect the U.S. to continue to do whatever it takes to help support Taiwan defense-wise? What extent can the U.S. help us?
Yeah, so the United States can do a lot of things. The issue is, will it provoke China, number one, and will it actually help Taiwan materially to do those things? And over the last 4 years, the United States has actually extended. They've regularized the military arms sales process. So we've actually seen several military packages approved for sale to Taiwan, and they've also increased the level and the pace of exchange of military officers between the two sides. This doesn't get much coverage, but it is an important development. And I think the United States will continue to try to strengthen those military ties between the two places. Yeah.
I want to just bring you a headline from our results screen. It looks like the DPP has actually won both the presidency and in the legislature. It looks like they've bested the KMT. Now, we don't have the official tally on the total number of legislative seats that the two parties are expected to pick up. However, as you can see on the screen there, the chairman of the KMT, Wu Dunyi, is now congratulating President Tsai for her victory as president, and he is also resigning from his position. And in fact, he's saying that all of the first-level officials of the KMT are going to be stepping down to take responsibility for the defeat in this election here in Taiwan. A momentous evening, to say the least. I wasn't sure that we would see any big surprises, but I think these figures, more than 8 million votes, I think that is the most that any presidential candidate has gotten in the history of elections here in Taiwan. Were you expecting to see the largest vote for president this time around?
Well, it's also the largest electorate that Taiwan's ever had. So I pay closer attention to the vote percentages rather than the totals. So I think is she at 57% now, roughly? We don't have the actual
percentage.
Yeah. Certainly. Can we get Leslie, our social media guru, to add up the current tallies and then give us a percentage on Tsai and Han Kuo-yu?
The last person to get close to that was Ma Ying-jeou in 2008. He got 7.6 million, about 59% of the vote.
That's right.
So he was very popular at that time. But she's getting reelected, and she got so much support. She was actually doing very badly in the polls a year ago.
Yeah, so this is a sign that the DPP really was able to mobilize a lot of voters, or the DPP certainly mobilized their own voters, but I think given the high turnout in both camps, I think this is also a sign of how polarizing Han was as a candidate. And there's a lot of evidence that polarizing candidates do gin up turnout, but they also they can benefit the opposition more than they do the candidate
Really? That's
himself.
really interesting.
Yeah. So you get a
People are
you get a
upset at
negative
them.
reaction to a polarizing candidate that can sometimes swamp the initial positive reaction of his own
That's
supporters.
interesting.
But that's interesting because it seemed like the supporters of Han actually were much more fervent in the way they expressed their support than
Well,
the
exactly.
Tsai supporters.
Exactly. So you've got this core group of Deep Blue voters who are very fervent, and everybody else who may not like Tsai that much, but cannot stand Han and his supporters, and so they're going to hold their nose and vote for Tsai, and that's exactly what she needed to win re-election. And let's remember, she was polling at about 20% a year ago, right? She had to turn this around, and I think the DPP. Han Kuo-yu being nominated by the KMT actually made all the difference.
Okay, well, let's take a look at Tsai Ing-wen and her acceptance speech. She says she wanted to thank everybody for their votes and that everyone participated in this democracy. And she said, in every election, the people of Taiwan are telling the world that we treasure our democracy and our way of life and our country, the Republic of China.
Everyone who voted
Oh,
today,
they have an English
So-
translation.
We're going to offer you just the official translation then.
democratic values into practice. With each presidential election,
With each presidential
Taiwan
election,
is showing the world how much we cherish our free democratic way of life and how much
So can we play
cherish
the
our
English?
nation, the Republic of China, Taiwan.
我也要向韩市长和宋主席致意，和我一起完成了这一段的民主之旅。我会带着选举过程中所我对我的建设性的批评，开启下一个任期。而就算政党立场不同，我相信未来大家也会有合作的空间。
I'd also like to offer my respect to Mayor Han and Chairman Song for completing this democratic journey with me. I will take your constructive criticism with me into my next term. I'm confident that although our parties may have different views, we will have many opportunities to cooperate in the future.
今天，台湾人民用选票选择让民主进步党继续执政，并且维持国会的多数。这样的结果代表，在过去4年，执政团队和我们的立法院的党团是走在正确的方向上。
Today, the Taiwanese people voted to keep the Democratic Progressive Party in office and maintain our majority in the legislature. This result signifies that our administration and legislators have been moving in the right direction over the past 4 years.
我要感谢每一位投票给英德配和民进党候选人的支持者，谢谢你们选择了民主和进步的价值，选择了改革和团结的道路。
I want to thank each and every person who voted for the Tsai Lai ticket, as well as everyone who supported our DPP candidates. Thank you for choosing democratic and progressive values and for choosing the path of reform and unity.
我也要向大家保证，我绝对不会因为胜利就忘记了反省。过去这4年，我们有成绩，但是也有不足的地方。台湾人民愿意再给我们4年，我们会把做不够的、来不及做的，做得更好，做得更多。
I promise that I will not stop reflecting and improving after winning this election. We have made progress over the past 4 years, but we also have our shortcomings. Now that the Taiwanese people have given us 4 more years, we will do more and be better to make up for areas where we fell short or have not yet finished our work.
未来我们会继续打造一个更好的国家，有更完善的社会照顾，有更全面的基础建设，更有竞争力的经济，还有更国际化的就业 以及就学的环境。
Going forward, we will keep making this country better with more complete care across society, more comprehensive infrastructure, a more competitive economy, and a more internationalized employment and education environment.
我们会鞭策自己，政府必须廉人而有效率，改革必须要持续推动，区域必须持续均衡发展，贫富的差距也必须持续的改善。当然，我们也会继续加强国家安全的作为，守护我们的主权。
We will constantly remind ourselves that our administration must be clean, competent, and efficient. We must continue to push for reforms. We must continue to foster equal regional development, and we must continue to reduce the income gap. Of course, we will also continue to work to keep our country safe and defend our sovereignty.
在我的第2个任期，我和我的团队会在过去4年的基础上，我们会加倍的努力。
My administration and I will work even harder during my second term to build on our achievements over the past 4 years.
这次的大选得到了国际上前所未有的关注。今天有很多的国际媒体到场，我要借这个机会，代表台湾人民，感谢国际友人对于台湾的民主的重视和支持。
This election has received unprecedented international attention. There are many international media here today, and I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our friends in the international community on behalf of the Taiwanese people for valuing and supporting Taiwan's democracy.
这次的选举显示，台湾人民希望国际社会能够看到我们对民主价值的坚持，尊重我们的国家认同，并且在国际的参与上给予台湾公平的对待。
This election has shown that the Taiwanese people hope the international community will witness our commitment to democratic values and will respect our national identity. We also hope that Taiwan will be given a fair opportunity to participate in international affairs.
中华民国台湾是国际社会不可或缺的一员，我们愿意和各国积极合作，共同承担责任，共享繁荣，维持区域的和平稳定。所以，对每个国家而言，台湾应该是一个伙伴，而不是一个议题。
The Republic of China, Taiwan, is an indispensable member of the international community. We are willing to work together with all countries to take on shared responsibility, take part in shared prosperity, and help maintain regional peace and stability. All countries should consider Taiwan a partner, not an issue.
这次选举的结果揭露了一个重要的意义，那就是我们的主权和民主被大声威胁的时候，台湾人民会用更大的声音喊出我们的坚持。
The results of this election carry an added significance because they have shown that when our sovereignty and democracy are threatened, the Taiwanese people will shout our determination even more loudly back.
这3年多来，政府紧守着主权的底线，也愿意和中国持续健康的交往。面对中国的文攻武嚇，我们保持不挑衅、不冒进的态度，让两岸之间没有酿成严重的冲突。
Over the past 3 years, our administration has been firm on our bottom line on Taiwan's sovereignty, but we have also been willing to maintain healthy exchanges with China. In the face of China's diplomatic pressure and military threats, we have maintained a non-provocative, non-adventurous attitude that has prevented serious conflict from breaking out in the Taiwan Strait.
然而，中国对台湾节节进逼，提出“一国两制”台湾方案，要台湾在主权上让步，吞下我们无法接受的条件。面对中国试图片面改变台海的现状，台湾别无选择，我们必须要持续强化我们的民主、 防卫机制，并且建立足以保卫台海安全的国防力量。
However, through their increasing pressure and proposal of a one country, two systems model for Taiwan, China has hoped to force us to accept conditions that are entirely unacceptable. In the face of China's intention to unilaterally change the cross-strait status quo, Taiwan has had no choice but to continue strengthening our democratic defense mechanisms and establish national defense capabilities that can ensure security in the Taiwan Strait.
我要特别强调，我为两岸关系和平稳定所做的承诺不会改变，但两岸双方都有责任，致力于确保台海的和平稳定。
I want to emphasize that my commitment to peaceful, stable cross-strait relations remains unchanged, but both sides of the Taiwan Strait have a responsibility to ensure peaceful and stable cross-strait relations.
今天我要再一次诚恳地呼吁对岸当局，和平、对等、民主、对话这8个字是两岸重启良性互动、长久稳定发展的一个关键，也是能够让两岸人民拉近距离、互惠互利的唯一途径。
Today, I want to once again call upon the Beijing authorities to remind them that peace, parity, democracy, and dialogue are the key to positive cross-strait interactions and long-term stable development. These 4 words are also the only path to bringing together and benefiting both our two peoples.
和平就是对岸必须放弃对台湾的武力威胁。
Peace means that China must abandon threats of force against Taiwan.
对等就是双方都互不否认彼此存在的事实。
Parity means that neither side of the Taiwan Strait should deny the fact of the other's existence.
民主就是台湾的前途要由2300万人来决定。
Democracy means that the future of Taiwan must be decided by our country's 23 million people.
对话就是双方能够坐下来谈未来关系的发展。
Dialogue means that we must be able to sit down and discuss the future development of cross-strait relations. Cross-strait relations.
我也希望北京当局可以理解，民主的台湾、民选的政府不会屈服于威胁、恫吓，两岸的相互尊重跟良性互动，才符合彼此人民的利益跟期待。这场选举的结果就是最清楚的答案。
I also hope that the Beijing authorities understand that democratic Taiwan and our democratically elected government will not concede to threats and intimidation. Positive cross-strait interactions founded in mutual respect are the best way to serve our peoples. The results of this election have made that answer crystal clear.
最后，我想说，选举已经结束了，所有的选举过程中的冲突都应该到此为止。我希望所有的支持者绝对不要有任何刺激对手的言行，我们要拥抱彼此，因为打败这个国家的困境，所有人都必须团结在民主的旗帜之下。
Finally, I want to remind everyone that now that the elections are over, any conflicts that arose during the campaign process should end as well. I ask that none of my supporters attempt to provoke our opponents. We need to embrace each other and unite under the banner of democracy if we want to overcome the challenges facing our country.
我感谢这4年来每一位并肩奋斗的伙伴，尤其是在我身边的这几位。我们肩上有更重的责任，眼前有更多的任务。从明天开始，我们还是每一天努力的工作，绝对不会辜负今天投票给我们的人民。
I would like to thank all of the people who have worked side by side with me over the past 4 years, particularly those standing beside me today. We now have an even greater responsibility, and there is even more work for us ahead. Beginning tomorrow, we will continue to work hard each day. We cannot let down those who cast their vote for us today.
谢谢大家。
Thank you very much.
谢谢我们的蔡英文总统。那接下
So
来
as you can see there, that was President Tsai Ing-wen, the incumbent, giving her victory speech. It was actually a press conference, an international press conference. So as you can tell, there was English in there. She was speaking not just to the people of Taiwan, but to the people of the world, with also some specific remarks for China.
That's right. Well, Karas is with us. He's an expert on Taiwan and cross-strait relations and security. What did you think of President Tsai's speech?
Well, I thought it was very President Tsai. It's not rocking the boat. We were remarking that her expression seemed more exhausted than exalted.
Stoic, very stoic, yeah.
Very stoic. I think she's ready for a good night's sleep, but she clearly is a stable hand at the tiller. She's managed her party relationships pretty well over the last year through some tumultuous times. She certainly managed the U.S.-China relationship pretty well, the U.S.-Taiwan relationship pretty well from the U.S. perspective. And I think she gave similar answers here, where she's saying she's going to continue to not do anything to rock the boat in cross-strait relations. And that's impressive, frankly, given the pressure on her from parts of her own party to do something different, and from Beijing's unwillingness to reciprocate to what is a quite moderate tone for a DPP president on cross-strait relations.
That's true. They've been very unfriendly to her, giving her a lot of pressure. Well, we'll see what happens. We don't know what China's going to do, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, absolutely. In her speech there, she actually, like I said, she was speaking directly to China, it seemed, at some points. She said, parity means neither side denies the other's existence. She also called for dialogue with China. As you know, since she took office, there's been no dialogue with China. Right. And she also called on them to abandon the threat of force. She also said that both sides of the Taiwan Strait have responsibility to ensure peaceful and prosperous cross-strait relations, and that when Taiwan sovereignty is threatened, the people will stand up and they'll speak out. And they have with their vote here in Taiwan tonight. Let's bounce over to our results once again and just look at the numbers continuing to climb for President Tsai. We're now up to 8.1 million votes ahead of Han Kuo-yu for the KMT with nearly 5.5 million votes. And then in a distant third place, we have James Song of the PFP with about 600,000 votes. So I want to ask you again, Karas, you were talking a little bit about Han and how it was significant that he conceded the election, and he also congratulated President Tsai. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of criticism of Han, especially from the international press, as a kind of Trump-like figure who has some authoritarian impulses. And so I thought the fact that he gave a very gracious concession speech, he certainly tried to cheer up his supporters, but he also said Tsai Ing-wen has been elected president fairly, legitimately, and we should all hope that she does well over the next 4 years for Taiwan's sake and the Republic of China's sake. And that's a normal thing to do in a normal democracy, but in a lot of democracies these days, normal is hard to get to. And so we should appreciate this moment, the fact that he made a gracious concession speech. There's no talk about how the election was rigged or the results are false or complaining about the DPP's campaign strategy or styles
fake news.
Or fake news. Yeah, so this is, and more broadly, can I just say it strikes me every time I come here to observe an election just how good Taiwanese are at elections and how it's actually quite powerful to watch the vote counting. And I have to say, I was part of a delegation just watching the votes come out, and some people got really teary, within our own delegation.
How do you mean?
Yeah.
You were
They were
the group
upset
of
or happy?
observers. No.
Yeah, no, we're observers. We don't really have a direct stake in this, but with what's going on in Hong Kong and the refusal to allow them to elect their own leadership, the tumultuous politics we have in the United States, the troubles with democracy in the Philippines or in Malaysia or Indonesia or Thailand, Taiwan does this really well, and nobody here seems to bat an eye. And Taiwanese really need to appreciate just how good they've got it. And
That's a good reminder.
And how good they do this.
That's a very good reminder, because we get a little tired, actually,
Yeah.
election fatigue,
Yeah,
because the
election fatigue. What are you talking
campaigning,
about?
campaigning is so intense for a long time.
Right. Everybody's just relieved that the election is over, but we have a legitimate new president. We know exactly how many votes she's going to win. We know exactly who the new legislature is going to be. There's not, as far as I can see so far, not any serious controversy about the vote tallying, and that goes a long way.
And I think I was reading, you were saying that when they tally the votes, they actually hold up each vote one by one to show who the person has voted for, too. Is that
Yes, and that's part of what makes it so powerful, is that anyone who wants to watch the counting can come in and do it. And
At the CEC, you mean?
No, at the physical
polling
polling booth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if people don't know this, if you have an opportunity, go watch a Taiwanese vote count, because the same place where people go in to vote is where they count the votes. The ballot boxes are immediately rearranged and then open, and the whole thing is completely transparent. So they show each vote to everybody in the audience, and it could be anybody. It could be me. It could be
So a foreigner could go and watch
foreigner
this
could
as
go
well.
in, a reporter could go in, members of the campaigns could go in, or just mostly it's ordinary Taiwanese who live in the precinct and want to see how their precinct voted. And the other thing is, the vote, they are acting effectively as democratic monitors. So holding up each vote means that they can see that the vote has been cast correctly and recorded correctly. And occasionally, somebody gets it wrong, and somebody in the audience calls them out on it. And there's a kind of argument, you got that wrong. Right? And in classic Taiwanese fashion. And that is just really empowering. It's, some old obasan, like, keeping Taiwan's democracy on track.
The grannies keeping us on track. We need that. So let me ask you that, jumping immediately off that comment, because there has been some kind of complaints I hear about, the forced requirement that you must return to your place of residence, which for some people is in a completely different city from where they work.
Right.
And that, could, take time, take money. It definitely benefits people that live in Taiwan. People who are overseas, they don't benefit from, having the ability to vote as an absentee voter.
Right.
And now, as somebody, you're from the States, which has absentee voting.
Right.
Would you recommend putting absentee voting in place in Taiwan? Or having observed the way elections are held here, are you a new fan of no absentee voting?
Yeah, so there are trade-offs involved in all of these choices. And what you have to remember is the trade-off here is Taiwan has really fast, accurate, transparent, low-tech, and decisive elections. And you wouldn't have those necessarily if you had absentee voting. So we know basically who's won, and it's 4 or 5 hours since the polls closed.
We're now at 9:24 p.m.
That's
Polls
right.
closed at 4 p.m. Yeah.
Right, and in the United States, in places like California, I think they're still counting ballots from the last election in California. I mean, it's astounding how long
Counting
it
those
takes.
hanging chits and
Right,
chads.
right, and at
yeah.
some point, the speed is
That's
an
important, too.
part of
Definitely.
democratic legitimacy, right? And so Taiwan is at the very speedy end of the continuum here. And
We're
the reason
efficient here in Taiwan.
Yeah, very efficient. The reason you're efficient, though, is that people do have to go back to their hometown to vote. The polls are only open from 8 to 4 on the day that the election is held. And there are no overseas ballots coming by mail. If you introduce those, you'd have to make sure they got delivered to the right polling places, because the polling count actually takes place at the polling place. It's not in the Central Election Commission headquarters. And so the trade-offs there are quite large. And then there's a really big concern, which the elephant in the room here is Taiwanese nationals in mainland China who are voting in a Taiwanese election. Are you willing to trust that 200,000 or 300,000 Taiwanese who cast a vote there and then send it over to Taiwan are casting a free vote?
I see.
I personally would worry a lot about the integrity of that election. And so what I think is a more feasible reform that would increase turnout and make it easier, especially for people who have to travel home to vote, is early voting.
Early voting. So you would still have to travel home to
You
vote,
still have
but
to travel
you could,
home.
you could,
You'd vote early in a secure, there's a secure ballot box. It's in the polling place. You do it there. The ballots stay there until election day, and then.
Oh, that's an
so
interesting idea.
Given Taiwan's current setup, that could increase the voting turnout, make it easier for some people to vote, but it wouldn't require a massive reconfiguration of this current system, which has all of these tremendous electoral and legitimacy advantages.
That's a great idea. You
That
should
is a
bring it
great
up to
idea.
the CEC.
Well, I'm
Did
sure
you?
they've heard an earful already from many people. They don't need to hear from me as well. So.
But I guess the other thing is too is who is that going to benefit one party over the
Well,
other? And I
yeah.
think usually when that's the case, then there are
Right,
reservations.
and that's another reason why absentee balloting is such a loaded proposal, because the KMT would love to have a bunch of people on the mainland throwing in casting votes.
But then locally, the DPP would benefit from young kids being able to go back down to Kaohsiung from Taipei.
Exactly,
for the
yeah.
weekend.
And so typically if there are parties on both sides of if there's one party that would lose out on a particular reform, it's not going to happen. And so my prediction is that there's actually
Nothing's
no
gonna happen.
changes for the next couple of years at least, unless it's part of a larger kind of omnibus change where, for instance, you lower the voting age, but then you also introduce absentee voting, some kind of grand compromise between the two camps.
But people are still voting quite a lot, even with, having
Yeah,
to go to
well,
your
and
hometown.
It's
so.
another thing. So let me just say again, the vitality of Taiwan's democracy is amazing. Taiwan, every election registers a much higher turnout than the United States has in a century.
What
right?
are U.S. turnouts? Are like 40% or
Yeah,
something?
40, 50, 60 sometimes.
Really?
And
Yeah.
Taiwan hasn't gotten down that low ever. Part of the reason Taiwan's elections are so high, turnout is that registration is automatic. Wherever your huji,
true.
so your household registration, they just take it from the registration manifest, and you're enrolled automatically.
So no voter suppression is what
There's
you're
no
saying.
voter suppression here, and that is, given where I come from, where that's been a problem for 2 centuries. That I appreciate that, Taiwan. That's a good thing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we just saw a very successful election.
We
right?
did, and I leave. I will go to bed tonight much more encouraged about the state of democracy in Taiwan than I woke up this morning.
Oh, that's good
good
to know.
hear. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. Again, we've been speaking with Karis Templeman from Stanford University. What a pleasure.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. And you're watching actually, Taiwan Insider, Decision 2020 on Radio Taiwan International. Actually, we broadcast Taiwan Insider every Thursday in a different format. It's a pre-recorded news magazine program. We have all kinds of features and games and recaps of the news and interview clips. It's a lot of fun. Andrew and I and Leslie get together to do that every Thursday, so do join us then. But we would like to invite Leslie to come back on again and let us know what people have been saying as they've been watching this live broadcast of the presidential and legislative elections.
Actually, we're going to toss to our results screen just briefly for one more look at the tally. Again, we're watching as the results come in for the presidential candidates. We have President Tsai, the incumbent, who has now given her victory speech. She has won a second term in office and avoided becoming the only president to have just one term. She will have a second term. She right now has 8.1 million votes to nearly 5.5 million votes for Han Kuo-yu from the KMT, and then down in a distant third place, James Sung from the PFP with 606,000 votes. We are also still trying to wrap our heads around the legislative election. We are looking now and then at the bottom of the screen. It's impossible to give you all of those translated. However, I will note that Karis Templeman just told me that he notices that a lot of the DPP incumbents have been elected back into office. He's saying a lot of those incumbents in northern Taiwan holding on to those seats. And it looks like the DPP is going to have the largest number of seats in the legislature potentially, but we are not sure whether or not they will get more than 50%. I think chances are right now that they're probably not going to get a majority in the legislature. We're going to have a coalition of some sort. So we have now with us in the studio, we have Leslie Liao, our social media guru. To wrap things up, you're batting, what do we call it? Cleanup crew?
Cleaning up the crew. I'm batting ninth.
So what do you have for us? What's going on?
Wow, man, what a doozy of an election that was, right? People, you got to realize we started the third hour very much still in the swing of the election. So people still posed many questions toward the election.
Can we handle some of those questions before we wrap up for the evening?
I think so, but there's also very nice comments. Andrew, someone very much liked your
Your tie? No, I'm just kidding.
My pink tie.
Esa
My neutral tie.
El Tola says, great translation of the Han speech.
Oh, wow.
And she also said, best Han speech so far.
Oh.
Because
Thank you. That's
Andrew
very
gave
kind.
it.
Also, there was a comment I forgot to tell you earlier. Someone commented on your glasses, saying, "Hey, Andrew,
Was
cute
it my mom?
glasses." I have no idea. It could very well be.
Hey, I just thought of a good comeback line to complimenting me on the Han speech.
Yeah.
I was going to say, my Ingwen is much better than my Guoyu.
Oh.
Sorry, that's an inside joke. My English is better than my Chinese. Okay, I'm sorry. It's
not
too
bad.
late in the night. Our cameraman and our assistant camera person, they're all shaking their heads.
Oh.
Not good. All right.
All right, so we shed some light on a few of our listeners. Mike Waterford said we are 8 hours behind here in Ireland. He's watching from Ireland of all places.
Wow.
Thanks for joining us.
And he said, my wife couldn't sleep last night thinking about the election.
I wonder if
Aw,
she's
is she Taiwanese?
Yeah.
Oh.
And cards on the table, you guys. I actually had not one, but two nightmares about the election last night.
Oh, Leslie.
So
Wow.
I can relate to that. Very interesting. South China Morning Post called the election early on. That's what Robert Hardy from YouTube told us.
Oh, interesting.
Daniel Kirkwood asks, during the results screen, does the KMT also have their own tally when the votes are being counted?
That's an excellent question because it did say we had two tallies that we saw there. One was the Central Election Commission, which is now, I believe, the main tally that we're looking at on the screen. We can actually pop over to our results now just to look at that.
The main tally.
That's the Central Election Commission tally. Now, as Kara Stumpelman was saying, what happens is that anybody can go to a polling station and watch as the results are coming in. That means reporters, that means the political parties themselves, and then they report back to their people. In this case, CTS, who is giving us the feed, they're our media partner. They were getting a tally that was being turned in by observers from the KMT. It's not a partisan tally. This is just people who are at the polling booth who are reporting back to an organization, and in this case, the KMT then sending those numbers to the CTS. Of course, when people are reporting directly from the polling station, there are much higher numbers than we get for the Central Election Commission because we have to wait for the final tallies, the official call-in votes, to get those tallies at the CEC.
Hey, very comprehensive answer, Andrew. Thank you very much.
A little long-winded. Okay.
Shen Sheng Tang asks, can you ask if there are recounts in legislative elections? I'm very curious about Taichung 3 and the close race by Hong Ziyong. I don't know if they called that one yet.
We can keep our eyes open for that, but I think that Hong Ziyong was looking like she was not going to get elected in that district. Recounts, they only do recounts if it's really a close vote. So we won't know about recounts until tomorrow, I don't think.
Okay. Daniel Kirkwood, another very active one. He said, so what's next for the KMT? Will they need to distance themselves from the PRC to remain electorally relevant?
We got that one.
Oh, yeah, Kara's answered that.
But I would also like to point out that there was not only there was pretty much a mass resignation of
that's
the KMT.
pretty
Not
big
just
step.
Wu Tuanyi, but even before the KMT press conference, the deputy Hao Longbing,
and also all of the high officials decided to resign. I think they might need a new start for the party.
It'd be interesting to see who takes power in the KMT, like which faction of the KMT will come over and take over the leadership. No.
Also, Daniel ends by saying, "Oh, also, Andrew, simultaneous interpretation is not an easy job. Awesome work."
Oh, you guys. Actually, if I may point out, my co-host Natalie did a much better job with the Tsai Ing-wen one in the beginning there.
Next one is we have, I think, looks like a user from Japan. Her name is Aqua, says Taiwan is the best, which is very nice.
Thank you.
One question from David Nidham. With about 19 million eligible voters in Taiwan and counting the votes for the top 3 parties, that gives a voter turnout of at least 73%. And we already did the math. Is that construed as a good percentage? What would you guys?
It's right about the middle. The lowest has been 66%, which was last election, and the highest is 83%.
But we should say that, actually since 2000, when we reached a peak of 82%, it's gone down a little bit every year. Every single year for the last 4 years, presidential elections in a row. So the last 16 years, we should say. So the fact that it's actually come up significantly, I think that's telling. It'll be interesting to see how analysts work that tomorrow.
Some people said that Han was a polarizing figure. That's what Carves said. So, but anyway, it's more than last time.
It's interesting because just doing some quick math, 82% of that turnout wasn't even as high as what it might be today with 19 million voters.
Yeah,
we have more eligible voters now as well.
Yeah, we're coming close to 24 million people total in Taiwan. So of course the eligible voter population will also go up.
That's right. Auguste Doyon responding to Tsai's international press conference. There was a bit of a conversation on YouTube about why she didn't look too happy.
Yeah, that's what I noticed.
She's
the
tired.
First thing I noticed.
She must look tired. And Auguste Doyon, I thought this was nice. Is maybe she could drink a bubble tea that could make her smile.
I thought it was interesting. I was actually surprised she didn't give her own translation in English. She has excellent English.
She does. She most definitely
She's probably
does.
too tired.
I think so. We go with that. We're kind of tired
I mean,
too.
maybe she wasn't surprised that she won.
Yeah.
Because she's been ahead all this time.
Yeah.
So.
And I have one to close out the night, and I think it's very nice. Be great coverage. Thank you and congratulations to Taiwan for demonstrating commitment to democracy.
Who's that from?
That is from a Philippa Riley. I believe she's from the Philippines.
Oh,
Great.
excellent. Well, thank you so much to not just to Leslie, but to all of our viewers, commenters for joining us for the last, holy cow, we're going up on 4 hours of coverage of the election results here in Taiwan. So I think we're about ready to sign off.
Yes, we are. And do join us on Thursday. We are here on Facebook and YouTube every Thursday, giving you the latest in news and features. It's a different format. It's not live, but we have a lot of fun with different games and highlights of the news and interview clips. So join us then. We'll be talking more about the elections.
And can you see that? We have all of our different ways. I've always wanted to do this.
Now look at that. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can email us, and you can leave comments. We love to hear from you.
We love comments. Do like us. We love to be liked. We like you. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for Taiwan Insider Decision 2020. I'm Andrew Ryan.
I am Natalie So.
And of course, we have Leslie Liao. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Good night.